Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's Yountville Town Council meeting for Tuesday, June 7th, 2016. I'll go ahead and call this meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Moeller.
Here.
Councilmember Durham.
Here.
Councilmember Dorenbecker.
Here.
Vice Mayor Hall.
Here.
Mayor Dunbar.
Here. I invite Cindy Saucerman to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Cindy. Next up is adoption of tonight's agenda. I don't believe we have any changes, so is there a motion to adopt?
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much. And let's see who that is. No, it's not. Moving on to our proclamations and recognitions. We do have three special Yountville residents that we are going to be recognizing tonight, and I see that we have one of them live in the audience. We may be having a second one show up here at some point, but we want to recognize three of our outgoing Yountville Arts Commissioners for all the dedication, the time, the effort, the creativity that they have shared with the town. Vincent Zeus, Nancy Gates, and Violet Hover are our three outgoing members. So I'm not sure if Samantha may want to have any comment, but what I'll first say, so I'll give you a little time to think about that comment. Violet, I'd like to invite you to join me up at the podium so I can present you with a certificate. Thank you, by the way. This is a certificate of appreciation in recognition of contributions to the Yountville community, honoring Violet Hover. The Town Council and staff express a sincere thank you for your contributions and your service to the town of Yountville as a member of the Yountville Arts Commission. Presented June 7, 2016.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, wait, there's more. Because this is Yountville, we like to also add a special bottle for you to enjoy and all that extra leisure time you now have.
Okay, thank you.
If you'd like to address the
it was an honor and a privilege, and I mean it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Nancy Gates and Vincent Zeus are unable to join us tonight, so we're just going to give their wine to Violet.
It's a matter of public record now.
Samantha, because
I just want to thank you.
Yeah,
really, just thank you, Violet, and Nancy and Vincent as well. It's our Arts Commission, as the council knows, and staff especially, is very hardworking. It's not just attending a monthly meeting. It's very hands-on, and a lot of time goes into it. So we really appreciate what you've given, and we look forward to keeping you engaged. Thanks, Violet.
Yeah, you don't get free and clear completely. Yes, thank you very much. And I know one of the big projects that the commission's been working on is still in the middle of the works, which is the underpass mural. And I know
I will not forget.
that's right. I know Violet's been very instrumental in pushing that forward. So we're going to move ahead to our next item on the agenda, which is public comment. So if anyone's here to address the council on an item that's not on the agenda, now would be the time to do that. I think I'm seeing everyone attached to an item tonight, so we'll just move right ahead to our consent calendar. We have 6 items on the consent calendar. Is there any discussion or action?
I'll move to approve the consent calendar.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. That passes unanimously. Okay, we have a series of presentations. The presentation is the theme for this evening. First up, Visit Napa Valley Tourism Update. Welcome, Clay. And Cass.
Honorable Mayor, thank you, and members of the council, thank you very much. Appreciate that we have the time to do this.
Do you want to do it, Claire?
I'd love to do it.
Okay.
Yeah.
He gets a rhythm going.
It's a control thing. Thank you. All right, so we haven't been in front of this group as a whole in quite some time, although we've worked very closely with the local TID committee. So we thought it would be great to give you guys an update as to where we are and talk about some of the new programs that we have and where we're headed. So that's why we're here.
And Clay, before you keep
Yes.
going, did we get a printout that we can give to Carrie, who's representing the Elmfield Sun? If not,
I can.
we'll make sure to get you a copy,
I got
so Carrie, don't worry about that. Okay, go ahead, sorry.
So I'll talk about kind of a little bit of an overview for who we are, which most of you already know. Talk about recent results, which are really important. As you all know, we are data-driven. Steve certainly knows that probably more than most. What the Napa Valley markets in particular, what our sales and programming, or sales and marketing efforts are and where they're headed. Our little brief synopsis of the visitor profile study that we did last, because there's some data in there that is really telling for what's happening really throughout the United States and especially throughout California. And then talk about why we have hired Cass to help us out with government relations and community relations as well. So that's what we'll do. So we're the official tourism marketing organization for the Napa Valley, and our mission is to promote, protect, and enhance the Napa Valley's position as the America's premier wine, food, arts, and wellness destination. And this mission has not changed in 6 years, so I think that's a really good sign. So I want to show you our boards. We have 2 boards. We're lucky to report to 2 boards, he said, smilingly. The reason why I like to show this one especially is because most destination marketing boards don't look like this. Most of them are made up almost entirely of lodging, and they don't have the diversity of what our board has. And the Visit Napa Valley Board has intentionally wanted to get other industries involved. So we have not only lodging, but we have wineries involved. We have the Culinary Institute of America involved. The county is involved. The Linda Reef from the Napa Valley Vintners is involved. So it's a much more diverse group than what most of these kind of organizations have. Whoops. And then we have a second board that's called the Napa Valley Tourism Corporation Board, and that's the fiduciary board that oversees what Visit Napa Valley does. So if, for example, Cass were to go to Hawaii on a regular basis, they would probably frown on that. And Steve, as you can see, sits on that board. This board is designed to have representatives of hotels from each jurisdiction, and also to have either government or chambers represented on that board too. So you can see that that's what that board is made up of. This is our budget from 2016, and those of you who are around 7 years ago will remember that the budget of then the Napa Valley Destination Council was about $400,000, and thanks to everybody in this room's help to get the Tourism Improvement District in place, it's now about $6.5 million, and we're spending it on exactly what we're supposed to be spending it on, which is primarily marketing and sales. That direct-to-consumer number of 9.9% should really be in with the brand marketing group, but either way, we're spending it in the right way. You'll see that our admin number is 11%, which is lower than what the management district plan calls for, which is up to 12.5%, but we really believe very firmly that we need to spend our money on marketing and sales. And then we're also doing some creative things with the Vine Trail, as you all know and have helped with, and we're also spending money now on the Guest Information Network, which helps all of the other welcome centers beyond the one that we run in Napa to get funded and to have training and to have collateral, so that we're all not looking the exact same, but at least having the same kind of information together. Here's some metrics from what we've done lately. Not we Visit Napa Valley, but tracking what's happening in the world of lodging. And you can see that our 12 months ending in April were very, very strong. Occupancy up a good number, but average daily rate up even more. And what the hotels would look at, if they look at only one thing, it's revenue per available room, which is RevPAR, and that's up by over 10%. We don't have this in this slide, but we'll fix that. Visit California just released their 2015 economic impact of travel, as they call it, covering all 58 counties in the state. And the number one county that was up between 2014 and 2015, the largest amount was Napa County, out of 58 counties. So we're super proud of that. One other thing, as long as this didn't click over, I will point out is that when we started, we had less than 20% of our rooms in the county reporting to STR, Smith Travel Research. Now we have over 81%, well more than what Monterey has or Sonoma has or Santa Barbara has. So it's the Napa collaborative culture that I think you see in the way that people are participating, including our lodging properties. I like this slide a lot because it goes all the way back to 2005. Those of you who are here will remember that the county funded a visitor profile study from Purdue University, and it shows that the top numbers are visitor days. A visitor day, 2 visitor days is, say, if I were to come here by myself and stay for 2 days, that's 2 visitor days. If a couple were to come here for 2 days, that'd be 4 visitor days. We use that on this because the Purdue study only produced these numbers. They didn't have individual visitors, but we got the same type of numbering from our 2014 study. And it shows that there were more visitor days in 2014, but if you look at the actual increase per year, the increase in total visitor days per year from 2005 to 2014 was less than 2% a year. So while some feel like tourism has run rampant and then we have 10 times as many visitors as we did before, it's just not the case. What is the case is that people are staying longer, so 3 days now instead of less than 2 days, which means they spend more money. They also drive in and out less, so that actually helps traffic from a visitor standpoint. Total spending up significantly from less than $1 billion to almost $2 billion. TOT collected up dramatically. Obviously, we do have more rooms, and the average daily spend overnight per guest day has gone from $233 per night to almost $400. So the vast majority of this chart is super positive. And then here you can see how lodging has done in terms of growth over the years since 2009, which, as you all recall, was a really bad year from a financial standpoint and the low point. So that was $190 million total revenue. Last year it was over almost $360 million, and in total we've gone up by revenue of almost 90% in that period. This shows transient occupancy tax by jurisdiction. City of Napa has the largest amount, unincorporated county after that. But Yountville is right after that, and we'll get a little later to a chart that will show you the percentage of revenue for each of these jurisdictions to show you how important TOT is to each of them, and you already know how important it is to the town of Yountville. So our Napa Valley pillars that we continue to promote are wine, food, which almost everybody has heard of around the world. I just had the great privilege of going to China with Visit California. And we went to Beijing and to Shanghai and to Hong Kong. We had a delegation of about 35 people most of the time. And it's amazing how many people in all of 3 of those places know the Napa Valley and want to send people to the Napa Valley. So, but what they don't know about is our arts scene, which was a great introduction, talking to folks who are leaving the Arts Council here, and the wellness scene in terms of both luxurious wellness like spas and massages and things like that, but also more active things like hiking and biking and the Vine Trail and those kind of things. So these are the 4 things that we focus on. Oops. And so here's a little bit about our sales and our marketing programs. I'm not going to go into detail on the sales strategies because this part is a little bit hard to understand if you're not in the hotel business. But basically what we're focused on is bringing groups of people in who are conducting business in the Napa Valley. And it's for 2 reasons. One is that they take multiple amounts of rooms, which is good. But 2, and most importantly, is they come here during weekdays. And as you all know, because we're a leisure destination, we get most of our people on weekends. And so we have room on weekdays to bring more people in. And we have a 6-person sales force now working on just doing exactly that. So that's super important, and we're getting better and better at it. And then on marketing, We're updating the brand, as always. We're refining our Cabernet season efforts and collateral, which I'll show you. We've expanded our media relations and social media efforts big time, and we just updated and now have online the new Visit Napa Valley website. And I should just go back just to, I think everybody, oops. I don't know how to go back.
Previous.
Can you guys back it up for me? Yeah, because I just wanted to talk a little bit about Cabernet season, and I know you all know what it is, but it covers November through April, and just like the reason why we're focused on weekdays to try to bring in groups, November through April is where we have room for people to come in. And it's not just about having space, but we've done, the team has done a really good job, and we've gotten media to write about what the good things are about coming here during that period, in that the valley's greener, the wild mustard comes out, it's easier to get into restaurants, hotels are a really good value then. There's so many reasons to come besides the fact that there's space, that we're working really hard on making that happen, because that low season still could be better, but we've made progress on it. So this is some of our media. We actually are really lucky to have the unincorporated county TID help us pay for this, because the unincorporated county TID can't really market itself the way you can market Yountville. You can't say, please come to the unincorporated county of Napa. It just doesn't sound that good. So they help us pay for this in these 3 really great publications. And we have a 2-year program. And we signed up a contract with Marion Carson, who is the agency for Visit California. They're also the agency for Pebble Beach. They're also the agency for San Diego. So it's a great company for us to work with. They know a ton about destination marketing. And they're based in Sacramento, so real easy to work with. And then all new collateral for Cabernet season. We improved all the logos from being kind of old and dated to much more fresh and appealing. Visit Napa Valley I talked about already. In the last visitor profile study, it was shown that the #1 tool that people use to look at the Napa Valley while planning their trip is visitnapavalley.com, which 5 years ago was definitely not the case. And the Welcome Center is doing really well, and we're happy to be working with all of the other Welcome Centers. Visitors are up, data's way up. Interestingly, though, if you go to the very bottom line, room revenue is down, and we think that's going to continue because there are just so many people who are now just making their room reservations on their phone that they don't really want to go in and sit down and talk to somebody. They can look at Hotels Tonight, they can look at TripAdvisor, they can, we offer it to everybody, but that number probably will continue to go down. And then this is the visitor profile study that I wanted to show you. The most amazing thing is if you go, well, one, we had much higher visitation from outside the United States in 2014 than we did in only 2012. I mean, remarkably increase, and the biggest part of it was China. So look at China at the very bottom. It was number 6 for overseas markets in 2012. Now it's number 1. So China is on fire, and it's just going to keep going and going and going. The vast majority of our increase in visitors between 2012 and 2014 were made up of folks who were from outside the United States. And then, so here's just a comparison of the most recent visitor profile studies. Again, we had more visitors. I think it ended up being about 12% more visitors between 2012 and 2014. Total visitor spending up significantly. Spending on lodging up. Spending on food and restaurants up. Taxes generated for local jurisdictions up. And jobs also up. So very good numbers. And this chart we love to show because the question here is what would make your visit to Napa Valley even better? And the number one answer in 2000, that's not 2104, that's actually 2012. But in 2012, the 14 or 15.8% said it's great as is. 2014, it was up to 30.2%, which means people were even more excited when they came in 2014 than they were in 2012. The number one thing that comes up that is an issue is affordable transportation and traffic reduction. The funniest thing is the bottom one, which is more wineries. I finally decided that those people had to be sarcastic, because there's just no way that somebody can see all the wineries we already have. I live here and I can't see them all. And then so government and community relations, this is relatively new, and certainly it's way more focused on than what we had before. So we have Cassandra working on government relations, and I think you all know her, and she's been fantastic to help us out and to know the ins and outs and to which issues to focus on. And then Catherine Haywood in our office focuses on community relations, and that's perfect for her. But you can see the advocacy efforts that we've been doing in terms of housing, minimum wage, traffic, short-term vacation rentals. And then some of the things we've been doing, lodging member survey, housing action committee, and the rest of those things, and this city council outreach, which is what we're doing right now, town council in this case. And then community relations, we've been working with Adopt a School for a long time now, and also the Clean Air Coalition, Napa Car Free, Vine Trail, as you all know, we're a significant funder of, along with the Napa Valley Vintners, Arts in April to help out the arts organizations, and we've also done bike shops and Leadership Napa Valley Tourism Day every year that we've been here in support of the various local TIDs. And I think this is kind of explained by what we've already gone through, so I'm going to keep moving. The lodging survey was really interesting because the common sort of thinking was that most lodging employees were going to live outside of the Napa County. Turns out that's not true. 77% of lodging employees in Napa County live in Napa County. So that was really good to see. What's also really good to see is that their wages are basically, the lowest level is still this close to making the new $15 minimum wage when that goes into effect, which is also much higher than people were assuming. They also get between 76% and 90% of employees receive health, vacation, and 401k benefits. So lodging is taking good care of its employees, and I think that's a big part of that is being in the Napa Valley. It's the same reason why the wineries take care of their employees, because we have to have the highest level of quality and the highest level of service, and so the hoteliers get that, and they're happy to take care of their employees for doing that kind of a job. And then here's the economic impact of the, not just for lodging, but for the whole economy in the 2014 study. We had $194 million in revenue from conferences and events, $332 million in payroll, $38.5 million in TOT, sales tax almost $10 million, property tax nearly $17 million, and restaurants are doing pretty well as well at $375 million. And here's the chart where Yountville shines every single year. You have the highest percentage of your revenue coming from TOT of any city in the town in the state. Is that still correct, Steve? And then now Calistoga is nipping on your heels, which is great, and they're going to open 2 new hotels, as you know. City of Napa now is up over 20%, which is great. So TOT is really important here, and as you all know now, even St. Helena is starting to like visitors. So that's what I have. I'd love to take any questions that any of you might have.
Questions from the council? One question I do have.
Yes, sir.
You mentioned April still being in the Cabernet season.
Yes.
How are you seeing April? Is it, to us, it's really evolved into almost as busy as what would be considered more typical, the
May.
high volume season.
Well, we like that. I mean, you know, one of the things that is true also is that November has kind of become an extension of October, which is one of the reasons why we moved flavor to March. So we'll keep an eye on that. It's still lower than May. I mean, it really jumps up when we get to May from April, but April is definitely doing better, and that's exactly what we want. I mean, I tease the staff that if we really do our job, we'll end up with December and January as Cabernet season, and we can take a lot of the time off.
Excellent. Well, thank you. Very much appreciate you coming in and getting us updated. I know a lot of this information, some of us here at least, when we come to your presentations, but to be able to share with the entire council and our residents is greatly appreciated.
Great, and if you're interested, we have our next conference a week from Friday at 3 p.m. at the Marriott. So if you're interested, you can just send an email to me at clay@visitnapavalley, and we'd love to have you come.
Great.
Thank you.
Send it
Cheers.
to me.
We'll send it to Steve.
Okay, send it to Steve.
Okay. Thank you very much, Clay. And Cassandra.
Yay, Cassandra.
So I'm going to, before we go to our Chamber of Commerce, I noticed that we did have one of our arts commissioners that's outgoing that we talked about in your absence a few minutes ago. I'm going to invite Vincent Zeus to come join me at the podium so I can present our certificate of appreciation to you. So please. Sorry, Violet, you don't get his bottle of wine after all. That's okay. We were just moving right along. So I just want to read this certificate of appreciation in recognition of contributions to the Yountville community, honoring Vincent Zeus. The town council and staff express a sincere thank you for your contributions and service to the town of Yountville as a member of the Yountville Arts Commission. Thank you. Thank you very much. Please enjoy that on our behalf for all the efforts that you put forth personally and professionally as an artist. We very much appreciate it. So thank you. If you'd like to address the audience and the council, please do. You don't have to.
You don't have to.
Well, thank you everyone for all the opportunities you've given Stella and I, and for the way you have shown me how a community can be so welcoming. And we've truly enjoyed our life here in the last few years, and it's been an absolute honor and pleasure working with you. One of the most memorable things to learn is how we use arts to transform the way we live and the way we love. And there's no better example than Yountville. And this will always be our home, and we love it. And thank you.
Thank you very much. And we will all continue to monitor Vincent as his professional art career continues to explode. So congratulations, and Stella, thank you also for all the support you've given us. Okay, we're going to jump back ahead to our presentation from the Yountville Chamber of Commerce and hear about the annual report.
Mayor, Vice Mayor, Council, thank you for having us. I think this will be one of my last appearances before you as the Chamber Director, and that's okay. I'm looking forward to it. It's been a real honor and a privilege working for the Chamber of Commerce, working for my board of directors, working for many board of directors. But at this time, I would like to introduce the chairman of the board of directors, Eric Housley, and he and I will present this this report to you, and I'm driving the mouse.
Okay, so council members, mayor, yes, Cindy's in charge of the mouse, so be careful. So I'm not going to read every slide that comes through. You're going to see some of them. We can get you guys copies of them because there's nothing that drives me. Perfect. There we go. We don't have to go that far. So just wanted to start out very excited and really appreciative of what Cindy's done for the last 10 years with us. 10, 11, 10, 10. I was here through the whole process. I'm about 18 years in, and she's been great to really get us organized and all. We'll introduce you to our new executive director at the end of the presentation. You can ask her any questions if you'd like to. We're very excited. The one thing that we'd like to express is in transition and knowing that this transition was happening, we've still been trying to move forward as much as possible, and you'll see some of the things that we've been able to accomplish in the last year, and then some things that we're looking to do moving forward. So we'll start. Last year, we actually presented you a rough draft of the Yountville video that we presented. Did it not play? Back one, Julie, please. Oh, sorry, Sandra. Click on there, see if it works. So the final draft finished. Let's see if it.
It's working right here.
It worked in reverse.
Yeah.
You have to. Is there another tab? Do you hit escape? Sounds good. The audio's awesome.
Should we close our eyes and visualize?
Visualize. There we go.
Oh, there it is.
You have to hit escape.
Start over. I'll start over.
What makes Yountville unique and different is truly the heart of Napa Valley in so many ways.
It's also the quaintest, most beautiful, and has the highest concentration of attractions, like wineries, like restaurants. We really are, in Yountville, the restaurant capital of the world.
And we have so many things to do, and there's food, there's wine, there's arts. Arts have blossomed here, not only on the street and in the shops, but we have places like the Lincoln Theater, which is a world-class performing arts center. We have film festivals coming here. Life here is great. That's why I'm still here. I've had opportunity elsewhere, but I'll never leave Yountville.
When I think about the secrets of Yountville, I think about not just the great restaurants and all of the things that you can walk to. I think about the parks and the natural beauty and where you can ride your bike and go hiking and be indoors and outdoors and just have a completely fulfilling experience in a day.
It's got everything. You come and you park your car. As far as this valley goes, park your car, you never have to get in your car again.
Like one-stop shop. World-renowned restaurants, great shopping, amazing wine.
Yeah, I think people get comfortable really quickly and easily here. Like, I think it's just kind of a relaxed setting that nobody's feeling, on edge. It's just kind of you settle in and you get in the groove and it's fun.
I think, the best kept secret in Yountville is really being able to just walk through Yountville and experience the serenity of our community. Whether it's walking across Madison, up Washington Street, stopping at the garden and just admiring the way the strawberries grow. Those are really wonderful secrets. Hi, I'm Thomas Keller. I invite you to visit us in Yountville and taste life here.
So as you can see, still going. Oh, this was an add-on later. That's right, the audio is still nice. It's very soothing. So as you can see, we were able to complete the project to get that out, to start to use that for media. A lot of times we're actually discussing about concierge options and how to make sure that we're talking to people about day trippers. So it's really important to provide the message of a wonderful environment in a non-pretentious way, very soothing. Park your car, put your keys down, walk around, enjoy the art, the food, the wine, the culture. So that was kind of the intention of the message. Secondarily, we were excited to finish up a rebranding effort. You saw the Yountville Taste Life Here logo that we've had for quite a long time. We actually went out and had another company come out and help us brand this, and took the time to do that. So we're very happy with that message and how that's come out. It's simpler, but very nice approach to it. I won't read the mission and the vision. We're in the process of possibly redoing our vision at this time, but it's the same and has been for a long time that I know all 5 of you have heard many times over. So the board of directors, we have a couple of people here today. Thanks for joining us. We have Julie Sekviar from TKRG. We have, who else is behind me? Devin. Hi, Devin. And Devin Avery was able to join us. The USA is playing right now soccer, so you will not get Mikkel here. So he's somewhere. So anyway, very excited. The new board, a lot of people very interested in promoting the town and keeping it unique, and a lot of creative people that are on the board now. So probably the most exciting time for me in the time that I've been on the board with the current board that's there. On the budget side, we're excited to come back and say we intended to come in with 686 in revenue and 678 in total expenses, and instead we exceeded our revenue and we came in under budget. So both came in well for us in the time being, showing we're attempting to be best stewards of the money as possible. So we're excited about that. Next slide. Welcome Center continues to take in a lot of people ever since we moved it from the community center site a long time ago. So we're excited. We're starting to actually look to see if we can start to gain more data, more international data, where they're from, more than just international, more data from within the United States, how long they're staying, things that we can kind of get more demographic information that we think will be helpful for us locally. So there's, oh, look at the logo, it just slides in. That's a good segue. Events, we continue to work through the events. Festival of Lights continues to be very successful. We've tried to change our venue of our events a little bit with some actual passport program purchases. They've made them more financially viable, but it's also made less of a burden on the town. There were times where I remember 8,000 people coming into town, and so this has really kind of taken that back a step. There's still a lot of people, but I think it's still a way to promote the town and actually make the event a little bit more manageable. We did the Hall of Fame watch party this year, which was a unique experience for us, and we continued to do the Veterans Day luncheon, which we're excited to do year after year. Go ahead. I think the next one, Karen, I'd like to introduce Karen McKenzie of McKenzie Agency to come up and do a couple of the social media ones for you guys.
Welcome. We picked up the reins on social media for the past 2 months, the last 2 months of the fiscal year, and our intention is to be active and engaged throughout the balance of the fiscal. And Facebook is our primary driver. That's where your money is best spent. And we'd like to see you probably double your number of Facebook friends, and that's totally doable. There's a town in New York called East Hampton. It's about the same size as Yountville, and they've got about 58,000 followers, and we'd like to replicate what they've been doing very well. Next slide. Cindy. Oh, Cindy, sorry. That's okay. Twitter is also very important to us, and what they provide us, which is quite interesting, is we see the demographic interest of the people that are following us on Twitter. And primarily it's still wine, 63%, followed of course by food. And then of course we're seeing increasing situations where people are getting into health and wellness, and so that's a marketplace that we really want to continue to activate. But by and large, those are the interests of the people that are coming to Yountville. Looking at results from the PR side of the coin, we're looking at a total audience of, about 365 million impressions. And those are impressions that are directly attributable to the efforts that we have done on your behalf. And we're looking at a cost per thousand of about 18 cents. And a year ago at this time, I stood before you and we were at 28 cents per thousand. So that's a nice looking number. And we've seen a lot of Reader's Choice Awards pop up in national media. This is USA Today's. And this was a campaign that encouraged us to solicit votes from the greater community. And so we were actively recruiting votes almost ad nauseum, but we wound up in 4th place in the United States. Expedia, the 30 most beautiful towns in America, same philosophy. And you can read the descriptions at your leisure. I won't take your time to do that now. We came in 5th. And Saveur, this was the one that we were most excited about. These were the Good Taste Awards, the most splurge-worthy restaurant city, and you've seen this before. Paris was number 1, Yountville number 2, and New York City number 3. You want to show the little plate?
Here's the little plate.
At Sever's, they spared no expense with the gift.
Oh, that's a substantial plate. That's a nice plate.
And next slide, if you would. We work also for the Yountville TID, and to that end, we recruit media.
What's up, guys? It's Josh and Amy from CaliforniaThroughMyLens.com. We're in Napa Valley in Yountville, and we're going to show you how to explore it in a weekend.
The first order of business in Yountville is to find a place to stay. For me, the Lavender Inn is an easy choice. It's located in the north part of town, perfect walking distance from all the food, and really nice atmosphere.
So when it comes to food, Yountville isn't lacking in great options. Here are our favorites.
It's the Napa Valley, so of course wineries are next on the list. Here are a few I recommend.
After all that great food and wine, here are a few ways to get active.
a couple of other journalists that have come through thanks to the TID. HuffPost, the Travel Report. These are all journalists that are primarily driving the millennial consumer into the marketplace, which will be an emerging clientele for you. And they've been quite successful for us to date.
Okay, so quickly, the TID is actually in the process of starting a whole brand strategy and a brand campaign to sit down and kind of go through all those efforts. So we're going to look to partner with them and not run against different efforts. So we're going to be looking at that. We're looking at additional revenue sources, continuing with the events and making continued tweaks with those. And then we're looking at something we've hit a lot of times is changing from a Chamber of Commerce to becoming a destination marketing organization, more of a, we are in many ways the marketing arm for the town of Yountville. There's not really the business political side that I'm ever in here in front of you guys asking for that. And so we know what we are and what we're here to do and to help drive traffic and people's awareness about Yountville. So we're considering that option just in terms of that without conflicting with Visit Napa Valley or any, still doing exactly what we do, just losing the chamber name and if that's a good fit. So we'll be looking at that for this year and making some decisions. On the marketing and public relations side, once we figure out the brand strategy, we also want to do a long-term PR strategy, long-term social media plan, and then keep on going with the media fam trips and social media blitz. So we're pretty excited, even with the transition, which is about 7 months of the hiring process. We've still been, bringing up logos and finishing videos and doing all these things. So it's one of those things where we didn't want to overstep knowing new people were coming in with new ideas, especially when you say millennials. I no longer fit that category, so I want to make sure we're not missing the people that are a little bit younger than myself. So at this time, I'd really like to, do I just click this? Oh, there's that logo again. That was on purpose. I'd like to, wow, that was not me. That was impressive. I'd like to introduce Whitney Diver. McAvoy. She is the new executive director of the Yountville Chamber, and she's going to come up and introduce herself really quick. And if you guys have any questions or answers for her or myself after, that's great. Thank you.
Mayor, Vice Mayor, Council, nice to see you and meet most of you for the first time today. I'm so excited to be here and to step in the role of President and CEO for the Yountville Chamber. A little bit about me. I used to actually get up in front of town councils in Cotati when I was at Sonoma State University serving as the student body president there. So this has a very nostalgic feel to it. I kind of missed it, I must admit. It's a lot of fun being involved in community politics. Prior to accepting this role with the Chamber, I was most recently working for Bottle Rock, Napa Valley, running all of their VIP program and corporate suite client stuff. And then prior to that, I was actually with the San Jose Silicon Valley Chamber of Commerce, where I served as Vice President of Sponsorship Programs and Events for them, and ran over 250 events a year and managed over 200 corporate clients for them. So it's a lot of fun. I really enjoy the chamber world. My husband and I have been in the Valley for a little over 2 years now, and I love calling this place home. So I'm excited to get to know all of you and the community members, listen to your ideas, and see how we can make Yountville a better place. So I don't know if you have any questions, or that's a little bit about me for now. So.
Thank you very much, Whitney. Any questions?
No? Oh, that's too easy. Okay, fantastic.
Well, we know that you're just coming on board. We want to save the tough questions for the next time we get to chat.
I appreciate that, John. Thank you. Where you are. Yeah, absolutely. And Steve has my contact information. I don't have an email address with the chamber yet, but my official start date is July 1, but I'm going to be doing a lot of meetings beforehand, so hopefully we'll have a chance to sit down and get to know each other a bit. So,
great.
Thank you.
Thank you, and welcome. Eric, anything more?
No, that's why I put her last. So if she got out with no questions, do you have any questions?
Well, I don't have any.
I did that on purpose. What's that?
Are there any questions of Eric or the rest of the presentation? No. Then I can excuse you from
you like it?
I can excuse you from the podium. I'd like to invite Cindy back up to the podium because we would just like to say a little something on your behalf. So stay right there.
They're going to turn the video on again.
Yeah.
Special video.
So Cindy, on behalf of the Yountville Town Council, I'd like to present you a certificate of appreciation. And hopefully you have room in Todos Santos for this on one of your walls. But it is in recognition of the contributions to the Yountville community that you have provided us. In recognition and appreciation for your 10 years of leadership and contributions to the Yountville business community as the Chamber of Commerce's CEO, which saw Yountville earn international acclaim, as we just heard, as Saveur Magazine's second most splurge-worthy destination behind only Paris, France, and USA Today's fourth best small town food scene. So on behalf of the community and the town council, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mayor and council, staff. It's been a pleasure working with you all these years, and I can't imagine doing it anywhere else, although Todos Santos is calling me. And hopefully I'll be able to make contributions there. And I really appreciate your appreciation of all that we've done, the Chamber has done for the town and promoting the town. That's always been our main purpose. And this is very nice. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I would just say it's up to Whitney and Clay and their teams now to encourage you to come back and bring a lot of your new neighbors with you in the international travel category. Thank you again. And thank you to all the board members that are here tonight and other members of the Chamber of Commerce, whatever we're going to be calling you at the next quarterly meeting.
Our head members at Mexico City.
I couldn't even see Dave. There he is back there. Thank you very much. We are going to move on to our next presentation. And I know we might lose a couple people here. A lot of name tags might walk out of the room right now. So before I invite our next presentation, we'll just give folks a moment. Thank you all. But next up, we are going to get a presentation from Marin Clean Energy so we can get updated on their community outreach plan. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm bummed that I don't have the opportunity to do additional outreach right here, but I'm sure they'll get mailers and notices, and we'll find them at a farmer's market at some point, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So, Mayor, council members, thank you so much for having me here. My name's Alexandra McGee, and I have recently replaced MCE staff representative Allison Hang, who I think did a presentation for your council in March. So her husband got a job in Los Angeles on the new Beauty and the Beast film, and so they had to whisk down south and have given me the opportunity to fill her stead. And I grew up in unincorporated Napa County, so I'm very pleased to be doing this work with you and your council now. Ooh, I have the control. Okay. So I'm here to give a brief update on what all has been happening since we were last here in March. Oh, it's a PDF, so we can just scroll. Just for the members of the public, a brief overview. I represent MCE, and MCE is what we're going to call the public option for energy, beginning in Yountville in September. So we changed the generation source for the electricity of every account within this jurisdiction. All residences, all businesses now have a choice as to where their energy is derived from. So this chart kind of explains that MCE becomes in charge of that generation. We have a partnership with PG&E for the transmission, delivery, billing, everything else that happens with your energy. We rely on our partnership with PG&E to make that happen. And then the only difference is that now you, as a customer, have different options as to where that energy comes from. I'll go into that in a little bit and how it will affect Yountville. So, as your council knows, on March 1st, the council voted to join MCE along with the other 4 incorporated jurisdictions of Napa County. It means that the enrollment of all of these electric accounts for the incorporated areas will begin on September 1st, 2016. To that end, MCE is launching an intensive outreach campaign so that no one gets caught off guard come September when that change happens. I would like to direct you all to this new webpage that we've recently put up, mcecleanenergy.org/Napa County, and it will list different events where we will be present. If anyone has questions or concerns and would like to talk to an MCE representative in person, they can go and visit us and bring us your questions. Oh, all right.
Weird.
Okay, well, a ghost in the machine here. So this community outreach plan, so by law we are required to send 4 mailers to every address that has a different electric account. For good measure, we send one more. So the first mailer went out within Yountville on the 1st of June. So I was here in city staff, worked with city staff, especially Nathan, on training everyone on how to answer some basic questions about MCE, about the options that are coming in September. And I don't think we had a single walk-in, unfortunately, but the mailers do tend to prompt some community engagement, and the second mailer will be going out in early July. But when we left here on the 3rd, your staff is now trained on the basics of community choice aggregation mechanisms, how MCE becomes a generation provider, and if anyone comes in with a question that is a bit too nuanced, they know how to escalate it to our call center and to get it to an MCE representative who can answer that question. Also, I'll just note that our multilingual call center is open 24/7 until the end of October. They have access to 108 translation services. So even if your out-of-town guests have questions about MCE, we will serve them as well. Oh, and then if anyone drives south on the 29, this image here where it says "Look for your new clean energy choices" is on a billboard just south of American Canyon. So we are in the process right now of forming a community leader advisory group, which typically is about 15 to 20 representatives. In this case, it'll be of all 5 areas that will inform MCE of how to better do outreach to the specific jurisdictions. You'll notice that we typically tend to do 2 specialized outreach tracks, one for senior citizens and the other for Spanish speakers. And it makes more sense for Napa, American Canyon, St. Helena, and Calistoga to do more the Spanish tract, since all cities have over 30% of their populations that speak a language other than English at home. But with Yountville's 45% of the population over 65, we really want to make sure that we're doing all we can to reach senior citizens in Yountville. So what I'm doing here today is actually to collect your feedback. We do want to stay as engaged as we can. So if there's any organizations that you think we should reach out to at the beginning of this outreach strategy, any nonprofits that you feel are symbolically important in your community, we would like to reach out to them initially upon your suggestion. So I'll also note that we will be contacting the Yountville Sun to do some advertisement in there as well, just to get the word out. So just before I wrap up, there's been a slight change. So these are the options that we proposed in March, and these are the ones that are still available when service begins in September. But beginning right now, anyone in Yountville that has received their first mailer does have the option to already opt up or opt out. So opting up would be to the 100% renewable option, which we call Deep Green, or opting out would be to return to PG&E generation service, which is currently at 30% renewable energy. So the slight change is actually that our board met last month to discuss a proposed rate reduction. So when Allison came to you in March, we were slightly more expensive because of the third line item down. The additional PG&E fees had made us a bit more expensive on the bottom line. So the proposed rates that our board has preliminarily considered, and which they will be voting on this month, the third Thursday of this month, actually will reduce our generation rate to be. So what's represented up here is the generation rate is reduced 7.5% to make the bottom line the same for PG&E's 30% renewable energy option and our light green 52% renewable energy option. The news that I have as of this morning makes this slide a little bit out of date. We were able to go out and procure energy at a lower than expected price, and so we're actually going to be able to reduce our generation rate by 9% across the board, which will make us cheaper or at parity with PG&E depending on a customer's rate class. So for an average resident, who would be on our Res 1 rate schedule, they'll be slightly cheaper than PG&E's 30% energy option because the price of renewables is so low right now. So that might be some good news to bring to your board, your council. The same goes with commercial cost comparisons. Because I made this presentation last week, again, these numbers are now a little bit out of date. Hence, that's just the nature of the energy market. It changes pretty quickly. So again, our light green option will be slightly cheaper depending on the rate schedule and the time of use of each individual customer. And I have some additional slides, but that's primarily why I'm here, to give you some good news. Councilmember Moeller, you asked if I brought a big check with my good news. And unfortunately, I didn't bring a big check, but I can report that it's not necessarily out of the question. So for the city of Benicia, they've overproduced electricity on their solar accounts for their municipal buildings, and I just got word 20 minutes ago that we will be cutting them a check for $110,000 for their overgeneration. So a little bit of incentive here in the city. If you guys want to go solar and go hard, we will support you in that.
You at least brought us lower rates, even if you
I
didn't
did
bring
bring
us
you
money.
lower rates. A little more abstract, but I guess we could quantify that as well.
Excellent. Any questions from the council? Councilmember Dornbecker?
Well, I have been approached by some of our older residents who are, the most concerning thing was the expense. So I'm very happy to find out, and we can still tell them that PG&E is charging a charge for. Is that going to be a monthly charge that PG&E is charging them for changing?
So you're right, the third line item where it says added PG&E fees, one of those fees is charged on a monthly basis tied to the usage of each customer. So the more they use, the higher that fee. So, but the rate reduction, the MCE will, pending board approval this Thursday and a couple Thursdays from today, that will reduce the generation rate to such an extent that it will completely absorb that exit fee and give a bit more wiggle room on the bottom line.
I think that's a very important point to get across to our residents. So thank you for the outreach, and I'm glad you're going to be, offering them the opportunity to talk with you.
Are there any specific questions, or not questions, but suggestions? I know one of the things that was being asked of us is to provide ideas on outreach that might be a little bit more unique to Yountville, that might be something that you haven't thought of. I mean, I'm sure you've reached out to typical nonprofit organizations, faith-based organizations, things of that nature that are a little bit more traditional. I don't know how you reach out, and it's a little disconnected, but a third of our population live at a state-run facility at the California Veterans Home. I don't know how that interacts with what we're doing here in the rest of the town, but just something for you to be aware of in case you grew up close by, so I'm sure you knew about it, but
right.
Just how that dynamic might work, or it might not have an effect at all. I don't know.
Well, as long, it's within the unincorporated area, right? It's within the incorporated jurisdiction?
Yes.
Seeing, yes?
Yes.
Then it should be, then MCE service should be beginning there in September as well.
Yeah, I just don't know if there's an exemption for state facilities like the Napa State Hospital or the Veterans Home.
I'll look into that.
Okay.
Yeah, I might have a suggestion, and if I'm not mistaken, the ratepayers at both Gateway and Rancho are individuals, and so it might be prudent to reach out and set a meeting at either of their clubhouses, or whatever the plural of clubhouse is, if it's not clubhouses. Club homes. That might be a good way to reach out to a significant portion of the population that's on the south end of the community. I, for one, and I think anyone else sitting in the audience, received my letter. It was in 2 languages, and I read the Spanish one first, which didn't make any sense. But when I did go back and finally read the English one, what I didn't find in there, because I looked for it, trying to make sure that anyone who wanted to opt out, there was clear and specific language as to how someone might do that. And I know there was obviously a way to point someone to the website, and there was also, I believe, a phone number. But we just have to be cognizant that not everybody visits the interweb, but certainly that there's options that are out there. And I would just encourage that if there is that option to get into the parks that are on the south end of town, for both Rancho and Gateway, that would probably be a good way to at least get a nexus of folks involved and at least engaged in asking questions and learning about it.
Right.
I think that's a great idea because, as you identified, part of our senior population is a target market for you to engage and inform. So that's a great idea. I also just want to mention it'll be coming up in a future council meeting, but just earlier today at our Napa City Selection Committee, we had the conversation about how to represent all of our jurisdictions on the MCE board. And as of today, the recommendation we will be presenting to us more formally in a couple months is that we have either a shared representation, meaning one representative from the City Selection Committee represent all of the cities in the town, and one other person represent the unincorporated county, or we may have individual people from every jurisdiction join the MCE board. The third option, which is what the current status is roughly, is Supervisor Wagenknecht represents all of us right now. He has been representing Napa County, and he will be representing all of us at least for the short-term future. So that's something else for us to be considering, how we want to participate at the board level to make sure that we have that dialogue going back and forth, especially in these next 6 to 12 months where most of the questions and action may be taking place. So.
And I did check on Yountville's numbers this morning, so even the notices went out last week, and as of early this morning, there hasn't been a single opt-out, just to report back. But I will be coming back periodically and reporting on those numbers if you wish it.
Great, thank you. Any member of the public that's here tonight want to ask a question or make a comment on this? No? You're all here for the next couple items. All right, great. Thank you very much for updating us.
Of course.
Look forward to hearing more in the future.
Thank you.
And it being election day, and our Napa County Assessor Recorder Clerk also happens to be the elections officer, he is not here. So we're going to skip right ahead to our annual presentation for the Yountville Parks and Recreation Advisory Commission.
I'd like to welcome our chair, Sandy Fagan, here. She's going to give that report to you this evening.
Great. Thank you, Sandy.
Hi, Mayor, Council, it's good to see you again. My report to you is going to be modest. Rather than being quantitative, and you get wonderful statistical information, financial information, all that from Samantha Holland, and certainly our partnerships with Public Works and Joe and so forth brings that information to you. So rather than reiterate that and get into a lengthy discussion of that, what I wanted to do was just take a few minutes and talk to you briefly about some of the more qualitative sorts of things that we're involved in. The Parks and Recreation Advisory Commission, which we lovingly call PRAC, and if you don't mind, I may use that just occasionally. It's a little shorter and easier. What I wanted to do was to first remind you of the membership. I'm chairing the committee this year. We also have Diane Page, she's the vice chair of the committee. We have Mark Haugen, we have Verlin Chalmers, and we have Paul Marciniak. So we really appreciate their representation, their time, and all that sort of thing. I want to give them credit for the time they've all. But what I wanted, I guess, basically was to talk first, very briefly, I suppose, about what I see as PRAC's role in all of this. And it really was never our intention, and is not our intention, certainly as an advisory group, to insert ourselves in the day-to-day operations of the Parks and Rec Department. Samantha and her staff certainly have that well under control and in hand. We wouldn't want to do that at all, but rather to be a helpful voice, perhaps, in looking at the department's policies, priorities, practices, and these sorts of things to bring a lay person's eye to these issues, and we appreciate that. That's really what we're looking more at doing with regard to the activities and the classes and the services that are provided through Parks and Rec, as well as to encourage resident participation in all of these activities. We not only look at our residents in terms of participating in our Parks and Rec programs, but also using our facilities. But we're also very interested, as we've talked a little bit about earlier here, in our visitors. The tourists and so forth that come into our community and use our resources. We want to be able to tap into that and provide appropriate services and opportunities for those folks as well. At any rate, so essentially at each bi-monthly PRAC meeting, both Samantha Holland and Joe give us very detailed reports on activities and all that sort of thing. For example, I think later in the agenda tonight, you'll be talking a little bit about the Veterans Park Master Plan. That's been vetted through PRAC, where we were able to share some of our observations. Interestingly, when that first came up, you may be aware that there was a lengthy and very interesting and very timely discussion about the position of the flagpole. Which led to, I think you had some contact with the California Veterans Affairs folks about how do we do that in a respectful and appropriate way and so forth. That whole conversation that we were able to have that night with an individual that brought the issue to our attention was a very valuable one. And we appreciate that. And that's, I suppose, representative of the kinds of things that we're hoping to do, invite some public input on some of the items that are out there to the extent that we can engage the public, and as members of the lay community be able to share some of our concerns, which will reflect, no doubt, I think, some of the concerns of the general population here. At any rate, we have appointed 3 PRAC members to the mural stakeholders group, myself, Commissioner Hagan, and Commissioner Page. So I understand that perhaps a little bit later in July there may be another public meeting, and the 3 of us will represent Parks and Rec and that constituency, I suppose, to that group. And so we'll continue to do that as we did for the previous meeting. We, since this came up probably last year, certainly we've looked at the long-term planning. And again, we really have tried to stay away from programming and suggesting, that per se, or trying to run the department. We've participated in activities, and we've reflected on, for example, the later starting time for music in the park, the 5 to 7 sort of thing, with the food trucks and all of that. Reflect back on these wonderful ideas these folks have come up with and hash those out with them rather than trying to, like I said, insert ourselves. We've looked at the, just prior to the start of 2016, we looked at the 2015 through 2019 long-term plan. We looked at the town's interest in the community facilities, community projects, Parks and Rec projects, and certainly, capital improvement, and to see how those came together and how those met our strategic goals and the criteria that you have no doubt worked on, and we have as well, in terms of promoting the health and wellness of our community. More recently, we looked at the plan and spent some time talking about 2016 through 2021. that long-term planning. And what does that mean? Are there any gaps? Is there anything we've missed along the way? Not only the financial planning, but the logistical plans, what's going to happen first, where the priorities lie, and so on and so forth. So essentially, we talked about, we've more recently dealt with the Veterans Park renovations, and you'll talk a little bit more about that. We talked about certainly Yountville Park and the wonderful work that Public Works did there and working on that, and then the newly installed, for example, Oak Circle Park. As well as pocket parks here and there throughout the community. So really try to keep our minds and our attention focused on current activities, current needs, as well as where we're going to be a year from now, 2 years from now, and so on and so forth, and watch that progression along with you as well. It was interesting because with regard to the flagpole issue, for example, that came up with the Veterans Park, and I'm really pleased that that's it's pretty much been resolved and to the benefit and the comfort, I suppose, level of a lot of the folks that were concerned about that, and I commend folks for working on that so well. But with regard, for example, the Vineyard Park, the folks that wanted the pickleball court up there. I wouldn't begin to tell you that it was PRAC that led that, but certainly Verlin Chalmers, if any of you know Verlin's commitment to pickleball, he had to have had an effect on that. He is very much doing that. So it's even the nuances that are implanted in these various sorts of things that we have a chance to kick around a little bit, and we appreciate that. So at any rate, that's really what we have been doing, and what we will continue to do is to work with Samantha and her staff, with Joe and his staff in terms of their projects, to find out how they overlap. I have an interest in working more closely perhaps with the Arts Commission, since when the artworks go into the parks, there may be some interest there about what that means and what it's going to be and where it's going to be positioned and so on and so forth as we're doing this. So we're going to look to be working a little more closely with some of our sister commissions, and that's a good thing, I think. But anyway, I really wanted to give you more a qualitative response to thank you for your work and for the opportunity to work with your staff. They're amazing people, and to invite you to feedback to us at any point with concerns or needs for information. We'll keep you as posted as we can, and then we invite you to have that communication both ways. Is there something I can answer you with now? Or
I was about to ask the council. Are there any questions specifically, Councilmember Mueller?
Just one comment that I would like to make, that I routinely attend the Allied Council meetings up at the Veterans Home, and the most consistent comments I get when people come up and talk to me later are about our renovation of the Veterans Park, and they also want to know about the mural. And I try all the outreach that I can about who they can contact, but they typically don't really use computers. I bring up e-notifier all the time, but that really doesn't work. So I would suggest that maybe you kind of design some unique ways to outreach up there. Perhaps you can start through the Allied Council, or maybe even come and make a presentation, because you will see that they have a very active art group up there. They are waiting to be asked to be involved in the mural project, so I know that's more of the Art Commission, and it comes up over and over, and that's actually where I got the direct contact. Someone came up to me about the flagpole, the veterans part, and I kind of brought him down here to have those discussions, and had a lot of calls. So I think we really need to design something, a special outreach to them, because they're just not probably as computer savvy as many of us are, and when I'm telling them about some of the normal outreach, it's really not sinking in. So, but they bring up those two topics a lot to me, so that's my comment.
That's great. I appreciate that. Thank you. And we'll, matter of fact, I think that just the agenda item, reaching out certainly to those folks is a priority, but also other groups that we may have overlooked and could maybe do a more conscientious outreach, whether it's nonprofits locally, the business community, and that sort of thing as well. But thank you for that. We'll certainly undertake that.
And I would only caution
Absolutely.
that, and I understand,
Yes, I understand what you're going to say, too.
the dynamic that Councilmember Mueller brings up, but we have attempted to have our own enhanced communication with members of the Veterans Home in the past, and it has mixed reviews, but also we've heard from the administration up there that it actually works almost in a negative way in some cases because they're not relying on the structure that's in place.
Mm-hmm.
They have an activities department and staff. They have an administration and staff and protocols they're supposed to be following. So I think it does make sense to engage, but we need to make sure that we're engaging with the right people and through their process.
Absolutely.
So the end result could still be that more information is getting to people that are interested, but we just want to make sure that we're doing it respectfully through the proper channels at the Veterans Home.
I think, Mayor, that's a good comment, and I think with that I could work with Sam and Sandy, and maybe it's appropriate that some of us would go and provide an update or some handouts and do it in a very controlled, because you're absolutely correct. The structure is important, the information sharing in a way that gets to everybody, but we can certainly work on doing a more
Absolutely.
formal, structured.
Absolutely. Find a vehicle that meets our needs to get the information out and respects their system. Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
Any other questions? You know, we made a very concerted effort this year, we being the council, Public Works, the whole staff, to renovate, to build, to refresh, improve all of our parks. And so it's great that we have your commission to partner with to get the feedback from all of the residents. We don't get word from everybody. The more ears and eyes we have out there, the better for all of us. So thank you and the rest of the commission for doing the work that you're doing and working so seamlessly with our team. So we look forward to doing that because we want to learn about, you know, how effective are these changes, and
Right.
are there some other ideas that will pop up from these? How do we program some of the parks that now have more accessibility, more flexibility, things like that? So
Absolutely.
it should be really exciting coming
Good.
this next year and beyond. So
We'll look forward to it. I'll pass on your comments to the commissioner.
thank you very much for your
Yeah, thank you.
presentation.
Thank you.
Let's see, I'll tell you what we're going to do. Since we just lost Councilmember Durham, I'm just going to ask for about a 3-minute break because we do have a public hearing coming up. Just waiting for the light. Because the rest of the world will think that we just kept on going. And we are back from our very brief break. We are going to move on to our public hearing for tonight, item 9A, use permit amendment request by Protea. Start with staff report, please.
Good evening. Tonight you have before you a use permit amendment, and it's for the business Protea located at 6488 Washington Street. And that street, or that property, has two businesses. Protea is in the south building and Priest Ranch is in the north building. They both share use of the open space areas, and by agreement, Priest Ranch is to have use of its front patio and the central courtyard, where Protea is to have use of its front patio and the rooftop terrace. And neither use permit allows employee service of food or drink in these outdoor areas. But customers are free to take their food outside themselves. And at the rear of the parcel is a 13-space parking lot. The spaces are allocated 9 spaces to Priest Ranch, 3 spaces to Protea, and 1 space for the apartment that's above the tasting room. And these parking standards or minimums are based on the parking ratios in the Yountville Municipal Code. They're based on the use in addition to the square footage of the business. In July of last year, the Town Council approved a use permit for Protea, a limited service restaurant, and that permit allows guests to order food and drink at the counter and to pick up prepared plates at the counter as well. Customers, like I said, are free to take their food and drink outside themselves, but employees are not permitted to deliver plates or beverages to customers in any of the outdoor areas. And the approved permit actually includes a condition of approval that states, quote, all food served to the public shall be self-serve, no service is permitted. And it is that condition is the reason the applicant is before you tonight. They are seeking to amend that condition so that employees can serve the guests both on the front patio and the rooftop terrace, and that would occur after the customer is ordered at the counter themselves. And the request is made so that Protea can obtain a license from ABC for on-sale beer and wine. And ABC regulations are specific that when a single property has conflicting licenses, ABC licenses, for areas that are not within line of sight of that business, ABC either requires physical separation of the space or employee service to a customer. And in this case, Priest Ranch has a duplicate O2, and that's a wine tasting license, and Protea is seeking to obtain a Type 41 license, which is the on-site beer and wine. And the ABC rules are meant to provide adequate control so that alcohol consumption is per the appropriate permit and that they don't intermingle or conflict. So while the application to add employee service really does not dramatically alter the approved use, what it does do is formally use outdoor areas that trigger a parking impact that wasn't previously figured into this use when it was before the council last. Additionally, the expansion of a use to allow table service at a business that is prohibited from doing so would create a precedent for other limited service restaurants in town that would like to do the same. So that's the reason it's before you tonight. So the first issue analyzed in the staff report is that of FAR and open space. And as you know, at the recent joint meeting of the Council and the Zoning and Design Review Board, the consensus of the members was that when an outdoor open space area is a use area for a business, it should not count as FAR and building mass, but it should be analyzed and evaluated in terms of impacts of that use. So we don't see a shift in the balance of open space and FAR. We are recommending a condition of approval that a sign, though, be installed at the base of the stairwell stating that this is public open space. We've heard that the public doesn't often know that these spaces are available to them, so they can continue to use the space even when there's more formal service. So the next issue discussed in the staff report is the parking impact of limited table service. And limited service restaurants are assessed a parking standard of one space per 250 square feet of floor area. And that is applied in town to indoor spaces only and not to outdoor areas. And so at Protea, it applies to the approximately 600 square foot indoor space, but not the equally 600 square foot rooftop terrace or the front patio of about 100 feet. And that service in those areas triggers an additional parking standard that's been applied different ways in the town. One example is Napa style. And when that application for use permit amendment came before the council, the applicant was requesting courtesy service of plates to customers at what was also a limited service restaurant, very similar to the request before you tonight. And based on the anticipated higher parking demand, the staff had recommended and the council approved a ratio of 1 parking space per 5 seats. And the town has traditionally applied a seat standard for parking for restaurants. A more traditional sit-down restaurant is assessed at 1 space for 3 seats, and this standard for the limited service was developed to address the fact that food service have a higher parking demand, and that's found both in the numbers of employees that are required to carry out the business, but also in the number of guests that can be accommodated at any one time. So with this standard applied to Protea, they would need an additional 5 spaces. But at that joint meeting, I noted there was some question as to whether this is the appropriate standard. So staff did some research, and we looked into what other jurisdictions are doing for this sort of casual restaurant model. It's not a sit-down restaurant, and a common standard is the same as our retail standard, the 1 space for 250 square feet of floor area. So when applied to this project, that would require 3 additional spaces, which is less than the seat standard I just mentioned. And From a staff level, there are different standards that apply to parking, and we think that either one would be valid in this case. They're really meant to anticipate the parking demand of a use. They look to models to try to anticipate that, and they're not perfect. And so there's been some question of whether these formulas have caught up to the current day and age, where there are sharing uses such as Uber, where there will be self-driving cars. And I don't know what to tell you, but I know that these are the standards that are out there now. So until there's more of an industry-wide study that is to analyze parking, or the town does a study itself, I'm hesitant to recommend anything but these more traditional standards, the seat count or the square foot count. So when it comes to this property, that would require somewhere between 3 and 5 spaces. And when we look at those, staff has found that the seat count standard is high on the enforcement side of the coin, because we have to count seats, we have to ensure that additional seats aren't added, we have to make sure that seats that weren't counted aren't being served. So we do see value in moving to the square footage standard, and what that does is apply the same standard indoors as outdoors, and we think that's a fair estimate of what the parking demand will be. In this case, we have a 13-space parking lot, and there's no room to add new spaces that are independently accessible, but we think there is an opportunity to provide stacked parking at the back of the lot. There are 2 spaces that could be used back there. It would block 3 other spaces, but if those 5 spaces were used and managed by the business for employees and owner vehicles, it could go a long way to addressing the parking impact that would otherwise float out into the neighborhoods and provide and create an issue for our residents. So we are recommending that 2 of those spaces go to satisfy the additional 3 space burden, and that there is an option for that last space to be provided off-site in compliance with the town's employee parking management policy, and the parking of that employee vehicle in a designated location, and subject to a $1,500 rental fee for that off-site space per year. And we really feel that it's important to account for all of the parking that is required for this increase in the use and intensity for the table service. And that's because it would establish precedent for these other businesses. We know that we have wine tasting and limited service restaurant uses that would like to do the same, and we don't want to inadvertently address this business's needs while creating a parking impact throughout town. So that is our recommendation. And there's one last issue to discuss with the additional use of service on the rooftop terrace, and that's impacts associated with the hours of use, the noise, the lighting that may accompany an alcohol type use. And we don't really see that as very different from the conditions that you've already approved on the property that limits its use until 9 p.m. The property does have low level lighting up there that's directed downward. That's not to change on the use. And so we think that is appropriate, but we want to raise it for your option to consider if you want to change those hours to a seasonal standard for early hours in the winter months and the 9 o'clock standard for the summer months. But like I say, we are recommending approval. We find that with the parking standard suggested by staff to mirror the indoor standard and the provision of the 2 spaces in the lot plus the employee parking management plan for the third, that the impacts of the increased use are met, and we would like to recommend approval.
One quick question before I ask the council members. The existing approval, the expectation of that use included beer and wine, correct?
It did. The condition was that alcohol consumption is permitted pursuant to ABC standards. So
But
as long as they meet those
that wouldn't be an
standards.
additional ask in and of itself. That's already been approved by our original conditions of use.
Yes, but what's
Based
interesting
on the
here
ABC,
is the 2
yeah.
standards conflict with one another,
Understood.
which is why they're in front of you.
Right. Okay. Other questions of the staff report? Anybody? Councilmember Mueller?
Yeah, I have a couple. So this has really come up because, well, let me ask it a different way. So when we were first going through the initial approval, was there any conversation with ABC? I mean, I'm trying to figure out why this was a surprise. Is this something that we really should anticipate in the future for future applications that come, that they should at least have some conversation with ABC to get some general idea, because these are pretty basic ABC rules that they need line of sight and things like that. Was there any of that conversation that staff or?
Well, it certainly came as
the
a surprise
applicant?
afterwards that this rule was in effect and that it limited the business's ability to conduct business as they envisioned. We do not enforce ABC rules. We condition it that they can conduct the use so long as it complies with ABC rules. There was a disconnect there, certainly. It's something we're aware of now, and when it comes up again, we'll know it with the next project.
Okay, so you'll be doing, okay, so that's one question. Also, I'd like a little more information how, if we approve this resolution, there's a part in here that says impact on Priest Ranch. So if we approve this resolution, it may eliminate the ability of Priest Ranch to come back to the council to request outdoor service.
Yes, because if Priest Ranch were to come back and request outdoor service of wine tasting, that would trigger a parking standard that can't be met in the parking lot. And unless they were able to come up with another solution, it would limit their ability for that type of expansion of use.
But theoretically, you could find maybe some double parking or additional parking for them too, right? I'm just not seeing how it totally...
I don't see how additional spaces can be wedged into that lot. I think we're accounting for all of them during this application.
I want to caution us from a hypothetical situation that isn't before us.
But it's in the staff report, so I'm just trying to understand what this means, because you put it in the staff report, and it just wasn't clear to me what it meant exactly.
So let's hear from our town attorney.
I think what it really means is that if Priest Ranch does want to come forward with a request for an amendment to their use permit, they would then have to come up with parking spaces. It's not really the town's obligation to solve the problem for them.
Okay.
But we're highlighting, I think, for the council, the fact that there will be a problem there. And frankly, that's really sort of a business relationship between the occupants of the premises. But it is highlighting for your awareness that space is limited, and that they will need to solve a more difficult problem if they also want to do the same thing.
But that's the reason for my comment, that we're talking about a what if and maybe, and
which may never
to
come
put
to
that
be.
burden on this application, I don't think is necessarily appropriate. We have the information as you presented it, but I don't want to get into a dialogue about what they may or may not do a different business. So, sorry. Any other questions?
Nope, that's it.
Vice Mayor?
So my question is not dissimilar from Councilmember Muller's, and that was, I know that we approved the 41 before, but the diligence, it appears, by the applicant initially didn't foresee this potential issue. So in that regard, we did approve that already. So now they're just looking for us to modify the actual use. Okay, that's my first question. Can you, because I know in the staff report you say that by doing this, we create a potential precedent for, and you mentioned RH and Stewart as potential others where this precedent would cause an issue. Is there others that might cause issue with? Or is that something we can't,
it creates a problem almost universally. So to just step it back a little bit, I'd go even a harder line on this and say that the absolute minimum standard you can apply is the limited service restaurant standard. If you go anywhere below that, then you're essentially saying that the municipal code is a series of guidelines, when in fact they're rules. And so when you identify a couple of potential businesses in town that may also want an exception, I think you could open that up to, frankly, everybody.
Everyone.
Yeah.
So that was my next question. Could that theoretically be an issue for the bakery?
I think it's theoretically an issue for every single application involving parking in this town. And so I would recommend not even entertaining the notion of going below that standard. It's already pretty low, but I don't see any way in your code you can get lower. If you have concerns about the appropriateness of these standards, as was mentioned in the initial presentation, that's an issue for amending your code, but not really an issue for excusing compliance with the code in a particular use application. I think that would be a more general discussion and a true code amendment.
And just to be clear, the minimum that you're referring to would be the 3 additional spaces.
So, yes, there are 2 standards.
Based on retail square footage.
And just to give a little legal context, you have 2 options in your code, essentially, the full-service restaurant and the limited-service restaurant. And what happened here is you have some uses that aren't quite either. They're somewhere in between, and that's where your planning director has authority to try to figure out which one it's most like, or to craft a standard that is closest to these other comparable uses. But the lowest standard that there is limited service restaurant, and that is a parking space per square foot, 250 square foot, I think. And that's the lowest I think that your code will allow you to go.
But that, just to be clear, that's the 5 spaces?
3.
That's the 3, yeah.
Okay.
We're presently not employing that standard. Is that correct?
You are to true limited service restaurants, and
but not in this current application. Not in the amendment. Should it be approved, that might be one of the options and directions we could go.
I believe
But as
that's staff's recommendation.
That's stipulated today. That standard does not exist. They don't have.
It hasn't been applied to outdoor use areas
Correct.
because outdoor use areas have been prohibited from being
used.
They have no service at all.
I'm just making sure that I understand, and maybe that the record is clear, that we don't have that with this applicant today.
Right. So this applicant, for example, people can take their food out, and theoretically they could walk it upstairs. They could take it to the park. They could go to a bench on the sidewalk. It doesn't impact their parking at all because they're just carrying it out, and where they go with it is up to them. Okay. If you have a situation, though, where staff is delivering the food, that's what triggers the additional use, and also isn't 100% covered by the code, but your range of options is limited service restaurant to full service restaurant.
Okay.
It's somewhere in there.
Thank you.
Yeah, before your question, because I want to follow up on what Mike just said. So what stops somebody from their order is delivered to a table from then taking that food to the park or to a bench or to anything else, and thus not having any impact on parking or employees or anything else?
Oh, I wouldn't say they have no impact, but your code would cover the act of the server delivering the food. That's what your code triggers the parking requirement for. That, of course, could be amended again, but that's what your code says, is that's a limited service restaurant, and therefore certain parking impacts result. Whether that's true or not, I'm not sure, but that's how it's framed.
Is it your interpretation that the trigger, because it typically means more employees, which means more vehicles?
The policy behind it I couldn't answer to. It was before my time, but the example you're providing, for instance, is no different than someone who sits down at the French Laundry and takes a to-go bag. I'm not sure if that ever happens, but one could take their food home with them if they got a sudden emergency call and had to leave. That doesn't impact the business. So the distinction here is all about what the use provides to the customer, not what the customer ends up doing once they get the product. That doesn't trigger anything under your code.
And to amplify, the customer has the choice of choosing to go or having the table service in this particular case. So it is the act of the table service being available that in the change in this request that is triggering the parking use.
But this is delivery service, not table service.
No,
correct?
It's table service. The applicant's requesting table service.
No.
Not the way I read the.
It's stated
this is
delivery
to
and
deliver, and you guys will have a chance in just a minute once we iron this stuff out. This is to bring an order to a table and go away.
Mm-hmm.
This is not to order at the table. This is not
Correct.
to
That is
have
Ordering at the table is
multiple
full
courses
service.
delivered with different plates and all that kind of stuff, and then dessert ordered later and the full.
You are
service
correct.
thing. Okay, Councilmember Dornbecker.
Well, that's sort of my question. I guess that's the question. A limited service restaurant doesn't mean that plates cannot be delivered to the table, because in many restaurants, BurgerFi or other places where you order it at the counter, they bring it to your table when it's ready. So I don't see that that's not the same thing as a full-service restaurant where you're sitting down and the person comes over to take your order, and then they, so that's a very different thing. And I think that it's, it's reasonable to think that it could be all right to allow that in, I think. Anyway, that
So
was my-
let's stay with questions for now, before, you're getting very close to taking
Yeah,
and voicing an opinion, okay.
But I just wanted to make sure, isn't the definition of a limited service restaurant one where people order at a counter?
It has several different qualities. One is that they predominantly order from a counter and that they pick up the food themselves, that it's presented in disposable plates so that you can take it to go. It has about 5 qualities to it, and I can't call those up right now. But taken together, they represent a model that is not table service.
I have it in front of me if it would be helpful to the
Sure.
council.
Yep, go.
So the definition of restaurant limited service is a business where food is regularly prepared on site and available to customers for consumption on or off premise, the design and operation of which includes the following, and there's 4 factors. Customers predominantly order and receive food from the walk-up ordering window. Food is paid for at the time the food is ordered. Food is typically served in disposable containers or packaged for transportation off-site, and the establishment may possess a Type 41 license from the Department of Alcohol Beverage Control.
And to address Councilmember Dornbecker, your point, staff is supportive of the use, but what we have to point out here is that the use to these particular tables that they're now requesting is what triggers the parking impact, because that particular table area has not been previously factored into the parking. So that's, I just want to bring it, that's really as simple as we can get that down
and
to.
Steve, the question I bring up is, why is it triggering it? And it gets to the fundamental issue of, so they go bus, so somebody gets their, hypothetically, they order at the counter, they wait, they get the food at the counter, they go sit down, they eat, they leave, they still need to bus the table. So staff goes and buses the table. Would that trigger a parking demand because they're now serving the table?
It goes back to how the council has previously written your use permit. And the assumption has been, yes, you've applied this standard previously. So it's not the action, it's the fact that the seats that they're serving it to haven't been factored into our use impact. And that's why I'm saying it's not the use. We just went through very similarly 5 months ago with Napa Style, and the council approved that because it is a more intense use. And again, what I would point out, if the council wants to change the parking standard, we can change the parking standard, but we haven't changed the parking standard. And right now the definition is, in order for them to be able to serve to meet their ABC requirements, again, this is what ABC is telling them, they need to designate these particular tables as their service area. Those tables have not been factored into the parking impact. So that's
Understood.
that's where we're at.
And this particular amendment still is a discretionary
Correct.
condition of use. Okay. Any other questions of the staff
Yeah.
report? Councilmember
So I
Mueller?
have one more. So you order at the counter, you pay at the counter, you maybe take a little flag and go sit at your table. So I take my beer up with me, I drink my whole beer, and then the food comes. Do I have to go back down, order another beer, pay for that beer, and go back upstairs? So the people who are bussing the table or servicing the table, they can't take any orders. Is that
Correct.
what we're talking about? Okay.
All orders are placed at the counter.
And
this
paid for at the
allows
counter.
the option for some courtesy service to the tables to
Okay.
facilitate the ABC license, but also to make the experience more enjoyable.
Okay.
So with that, I'll invite our applicant to kind of kick off the public hearing part of this. I know you've got to have something to present. So thank you for your patience tonight and welcome, and let's hear what you have to say.
Oh, no, this is all you.
Thank you for your continued support and patronage at Protea Restaurant. We're always happy to see your faces.
If you could just reintroduce yourselves for the record,
yeah, sure.
please. Thank
Dwayne
you.
Gosselin, proprietor of Protea Restaurant.
Anita Cartagena, proprietress and chef of Protea Restaurant.
Thank you.
We're after reviewing the proposal, we are supportive of what's being proposed, and we're happy to adjust our parking facilities to fit this new requirement. But if council sees that we need less parking potentially, we're open to that as well. Of course. There was one issue that you mentioned, the first line item where you said predominantly takes food and picks it up at the table. Can you define predominantly?
Nope.
Yeah. So if more than half of our patrons were picking up and taking it to go, but less than half of them we were providing tableside service, it would still fit this standard.
Likely what the code drafters meant was 51%.
Right. So we do have that number. We can post that number continually on a day-to-day basis, that more than 51% of the people take the food to go.
So
We
that'll
have
be a
that
part
data.
of our discussion. After you finish with all your comments, that's where we want to hear from you and any member of the public that wants to talk, and then we'll continue the dialogue. But I appreciate you bringing that up so our attorney can comment on that.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we have other opinions on parking in general, and we're happy to join that discussion when the time is right and where we begin to talk about adjusting parking standards within the town. I think that it's obvious that it's not that when these standards were established versus now is a very different environment. So we're happy to join that discussion, but today we're just looking to make sure that we can provide the right hospitality to our guests.
And really, that's all it boils down to for us. Over the last month, I've noticed the pattern and the flow of people. And while they're very gracious and they don't mind standing at the counter waiting for their food, I find that the look of relief on their face when they just go sit down for a moment to wait for the food, because we do get these hits of 25 people, and then there's 25 people waiting for all their food, and there's limited space. I just want to provide a slightly more relaxed feeling for them, and just having our POS person, or even Dwayne, who does this, he runs around all over the place, even myself, just run up, hand them the food. Not taking any orders, not saying, do you need something else? Anyone, even, I'm so nervous about this, even if someone asks me for a fork and a napkin, I'm like, everything is inside. Just so I try to make it as convenient as possible, but I would like to be able to provide a slightly more relaxed feeling. They're up there, they're enjoying themselves. There were kids to have to come downstairs. We had a patron with a screaming baby in his arm. I was like, oh my God. So that's all it comes down to for us, really, and just everything else that he said.
Okay. Any questions of the applicant from the council? Vice Mayor?
Thank you for coming tonight. I would guess that it probably has something to do with the fact that without the 41, you can't sell beer and wine, so margins are probably impacted as well.
Oh.
But I won't address that because that's not my responsibility.
Yeah.
My question is, will there be an impact with regards to the number of employees? Because now you're adding this additional, you called it higher level of service. So how does that affect the number of employees that you might actually have to have for the business to be able to support it?
Well, the alternative to this would be a roping system that the ABC would implement, and then we would have to post someone up there all the time. So the impact of parking is the same, whether we have an extra person on POS taking the food there or whether we just have someone standing up there. It's the same number of employees.
So you're going to use the same staffing pattern basically as you have today. So it's not as if by changing this level of service that you're providing, and we'll call it that for lack of a better term, you're not having to add an extra part-time person to come in and do that for you, because it's something that can already be provided by the staff that are on site during the shift.
Exactly. And I require all of my staff to have a food handler certification. So even if the dishwasher has 5 seconds, I can utilize them to go bust the tables or run food to someone, with a change of apron, of course, and wash your hands. So we do require that of all of our employees, just in case for future, possibilities.
This next question you may or may not like. Have you talked to your current landlord about this potential change to the use permit?
Yeah, we're in
Yes.
constant contact with our landlord. Any changes that we make or anticipate that we would like to make, we always discuss with them beforehand. And they did provide a signature for this application as well.
Okay.
And a letter of intent as well.
Okay, okay, well, that's good. I mean, I'd hate to think that council might do something that's going to have you have a horrible relationship with your landlord.
Nobody wants that.
Not that we know what we're going to do here, but thank you. Those are my questions.
Any other questions to the applicant? Thank you.
Thank you.
Any members of the public like to comment? Gary from the back row.
I know, clear out from the back row. Thanks for the opportunity. First off, I really enjoy having Protea in town. I really do. I think it's a great business. When you first came in here and talked about it, I was very excited. I've had your food. It's great. But I've really gone back and forth on this as I've looked at it, because I think the situation, if it were just Protea, might be one thing, but I think it is not an isolated situation. I think we are laying down a precedent that could affect almost every business in town when it comes to table service. I don't know how it got this way. If the requirements haven't changed for the 41 license, maybe there was a misunderstanding and now the business plan can't work. If the requirements have changed, maybe that's something that's going to affect all of our businesses. But either way, whatever you all do tonight or in the future is going to, I think, have a big impact on town. And my bottom line, I'll get to the end first, my bottom line is I would encourage the council to defer action on this specific application and look at the issues it raises as a whole, because I think it is a microcosm, not isolated, and will be pretty far-reaching. I also think we need to look at, as I understand it, Napa Style is the most comparable permit that we have, and they were given the one parking space for every 5 seats as a standard, which puts them kind of in a lesser position parking-wise. Well, they have to provide more parking spaces than what the staff is recommending for Protea. And so I think, again, that's why I would think we want to look at the whole thing all at once. Also, in looking at the gross numbers, staff says, okay, the total number will be 6. From the staff report, 4 of those, and maybe 5, will be employees and owners. So that really only leaves 1 or 2 spaces for guests of the restaurant to park. Now, how that works out with the formulas, I don't know. That's just how I understand the math. And being on the ZDRB, I have a fair amount of interaction with staff, and I appreciate what they do every day. I mean, they are working all the time, and I appreciate that they are not code enforcement officers. But I personally don't think that the fact that something is difficult to enforce is a reason not to adhere to the standard or to try our best to enforce the standard. And I will go off topic here and say that I personally would like to see the town, I know we're getting a part-time code enforcement person, I'd like for the council to consider looking into that and maybe beefing that up, because I hear a lot about enforcement coming from the 5 of you all. I also think that although we talk about what is predominantly 51%, this much, that much, the tables move around. Sometimes today there were 3 downstairs. I think last week there were 2 downstairs. I get the enforcement of it, but I also think that as a practical matter, allowing table service, even limited table service, is going to increase the time that guests stay there. And maybe that doesn't impact parking, but sort of as a layperson, I think it does. If you're not moving your car on, somebody else can't get in there. And I think the applicant recognizes that in their application and what they said tonight. They want to make a great experience, and sometimes that includes sitting on that great rooftop patio and having that extra glass of wine, which might be encouraged by table service. I don't want anybody to get me wrong. We our businesses and our residents all have to work together. We can't exist without that equation being balanced. And Protea, I think you guys are a great example of a local business that is wanting to make it and deserves to make it. And so I'm not saying don't do it. I'm just saying take a week or 2 or 3, think about it, some of the things that the town attorney has said. Look at maybe doing the whole cloth rather than piecemeal, because if you tonight decide to go 250 square feet, then you still have Napa Style out there at 1 space per 5 seats. And then you're going to have somebody else come in, and you're going to have to figure out how to navigate all that. And I finish where I started. It's a really difficult call. I would like to see you guys defer and do the whole picture. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, sure. No other members of the public, so you get to speak again if you'd like. Oh, I couldn't even see it. No, Lori's here for the next item.
So to your point about
Let's just, to make sure you just actually talk to us instead of back there. I know she started it, but
okay. So I have 2 points. The first point is that as owners, we will never park in those spaces ever. We rent the apartment that's on the premises. We will always park in that spot or at our other home in town at 1 Girardi Place. The second point is that I didn't plan to present this, but since we've had perspective from a resident, I wanted to give some other perspectives from other residents in town. They're not all here to speak tonight, but we did put a petition in our restaurant. We didn't go to anyone's house, get them to sign. We just put this petition in our restaurant. We have 164 signatures, and if it's okay with council, I'd like to read what the petition is that they were signing.
I thought you were going to ask to read 164 signatures.
Yes. Some of the famous names include.
Yeah.
No. The petition says, "We, the citizens of the town of Yountville, California, petition the town on behalf of Protea Restaurant to allow the restaurant employees to carry food and drinks to each seated guest, both in front of the restaurant as well as rooftop dining area. We feel that our experience of enjoying the views unrestricted by rope areas and receiving our food timely and effectively is more important than the use related to parking or noise that may be born from changing or amending any of the town's current ordinances." So I just would like to submit this as well on behalf of the 164 residents of Yountville.
Okay, thank you. Seeing no other public for comment, I'll close the public hearing and invite further discussion by council. Anyone like to offer? Oh, no, actually, I think, Mike, did you finish your full train of thought on your response to the 51% versus, what constitutes?
I wouldn't say I even began a train of thought on it out loud.
Do you want to
anyway.
add anything more before deliberation by the council?
I certainly could if you want some context for what the word means and what it.
Let's talk about predominantly.
What it's doing. Well, what it's really modifying is how customers order and receive their food. So what the line says is customers predominantly order and receive food from a walk-up window or counter. It doesn't say anything about where they go after they get it. And what it is in opposition to is your definition of a full-service restaurant, where customers predominantly order food and receive it at a table. And what your applicant is proposing is a hybrid, something in between the two. Ordering the food at the counter, receiving it at a table. So logically, that means that the applicant is proposing something between a limited service and a full-service restaurant. Well, you have a standard for limited service and you have a standard for full service. And so the standard arguably should either fall somewhere between the two, or at the very least, if it's going to use the limited service restaurant standard, it should include the entirety of the use space that is creating the limited service restaurant, that is the limited service restaurant, constituting it, if you will.
So am I understanding your legal opinion would be that it doesn't matter what percentage is takeout versus what percentage? Once you have delivery to tables, it can be one table or it could be all the tables. You see it as the same.
Once you have delivery to the customer.
Yeah.
So the one standard references where the customer pays for and gets the food. Well, they both do, frankly. But one of them says they pay for it and get it at a counter. The other says they pay for it and get it at a table. Those are the two standards, the two bookend standards here. But where they go once they get the food?
Just to be clear,
Yeah.
once, like I just said, once a single patron gets delivery to a single table, in your opinion, that triggers that type of service versus what percentage is still to go versus...
Yeah, your code doesn't speak to percentages that receive it at the counter versus receive it at a table. That's sort of where the code actually gives discretion to your planning officer. So your code contemplates the situation where you'll have some gray areas. And what it says is your planning officer can then create a standard based on the standards that exist in her estimation as to what it is that is being done. Is it more similar to limited or more similar to full? And she's essentially set the standard at limited service, basically the lowest possible standard. And I think that that's a reasonable standard in this case, given what's being proposed. There's some moderate table service being proposed, but it's not like you would expect at a traditional sit-down restaurant. So being at the low end of the spectrum seems to make sense here.
And again, that lower threshold is the 3 spaces additional.
That's right.
2 could be handled on site, as you described. 1 would be in lieu fee, basically.
So from a legal standpoint, there's only 2 points to be made here. One is that it's really in her ballpark to set the standard, and 2 is that this is, in my opinion, the lowest possible standard you can set. So with that, it's sort of up to you what you want to do.
Okay.
Can I ask questions, Estelle, after you're done? I apologize.
Yes, go ahead.
Sorry.
And then I'll have comments, but go ahead.
Yeah, no, I just want to make sure before. So Sandra has discretion, you just said. So I don't see Napa Style being comparable to Protea, given their retail, given their beer, given section that they're doing, given their space. So is it correct? I mean, it was in the, Napa Style was in the staff report, but is that discretion that we're talking about there?
It is, but it's my understanding that their standard actually is a little higher than what's being proposed here. So it was somewhere in the middle.
It was
there.
1 for 5 seats.
So I think the thought process here was, yeah, they're not apples to apples.
Correct.
But so the Napa Style was a little higher, and this is a little bit lower of a service model. I think
And it's at planning department's discretion because of these reasons, correct?
Well, because it's what your code says. The code gives her the discretion to set it if it's not listed specifically. So normally, if the code describes exactly the use that is being proposed, the code sets the standard. But where there isn't a perfect fit, it goes to her.
So you just said the most perfect word for me, which is perfect fit. And isn't that what happens in Yountville? Bistro Gentil is not the same thing as Bouchon, is not the same thing as Napa Style, is not the same thing as Stuart Cellars, is not the same thing as Ciccio. Correct. Is that correct?
I haven't eaten at all of them, but I think you're probably right.
I've been to every one.
Yeah.
So it is the planning director's discretion on these different, to say what's full service. It says what's full service. It says what's limited service. But some of those are more limited than the others, correct?
I would say for the most part, you're going to find that your businesses and your restaurants are going to fit fairly neatly into one of these categories. It's where we have a difficult time figuring out which category fits that it becomes a problem.
Okay, so I agree with you. We can say whether it's a full service or whether it's limited service. But within those categories, there's definitely subcategories.
Oh, sure, but your code doesn't distinguish between them.
But Sandra distinguishes from that with her discretion, correct?
No, if your Bistro Gentil comes and wants an expansion of their sit-down restaurant, the parking standard is very clear. It's one
per 5
3.
seats.
1 per 3, I think.
Three. Sorry.
Right.
Sorry.
Right. And so it's very clear. If you're a sit-down full-service restaurant, it's 1 to 3. And if you are a limited service, it's per square foot. It's this in between that she has some discretion to
Okay.
figure out which it's closest to. And basically, she can, and what the code says is that she can set the standard based on the existing standards. And I'd have to call up the section to read it verbatim, but the words are based on, which gives her, in my opinion, discretion to do what she did in the Napa Style situation, which was something of a hybrid in between the two standards.
So the precedent we're setting here is because of the use at the outdoor space, correct? If we were to vote for this recommendation.
I think what you're doing here is you are acknowledging that their use is occupying that space up there, and that it is actually being used for their restaurant, for delivery, for the actual transfer of the product, as opposed to a place where one can go if they feel like it with the product once they leave the doors. That's the distinction here. I think, frankly, arguably, one could say all along it's been part of the use and should have been part of the parking in the first instance. But I think reasonable minds can differ there, and it's reasonable to conclude that it didn't have to be included in the parking standards, and it wasn't. But now that you are upping the use to absolutely involve delivery, I think it's a hard argument to say that by taking food up there, that space is not part of the restaurant and doesn't trigger the additional requirement.
Very good. So then, are we able to allow them this use and hold off on anybody else doing it until we have time to reevaluate everything?
Well, you can, of course, allow other people to expand their uses into property that they may acquire or may already own, but it may trigger additional parking requirements. Again, the question isn't necessarily, are you going to allow them to deliver food upstairs? It's also, are you going to allow them to do it with these conditions, one of which is parking? So, of course, all throughout town, people may come to you and say, we'd like to expand our operation. And, of course, you may be perfectly happy to do that, but it's going to come with conditions. One of them will certainly be additional parking requirements.
Thank you very much.
So that's
I'm
really
not sure
what's-
that answered.
No, it did. It did.
There is the possibility that similar but uniquely different applications in the future could be approved or denied based on their conditions.
Yeah, so
there is a limited amount of precedent that is on the table here.
Maybe if I understand correctly, somebody else may come with an application
I understand.
and not have sufficient parking. And they're going to say, we don't have enough parking, but we'd like to do this. And I think staff is going to say, we're recommending that you deny that application until they find parking.
So that gets back to the discretionary component that makes this so complicated.
But it may not be discretionary. It may be quite clear under the code
Right.
that they need more parking, and they just don't have it.
Right.
And again, if the council wants to revisit its parking requirements, that's a separate discussion. But as written,
So what I promised
Okay,
last one.
8 questions.
I know. I gave him a
I have
cookie
this
earlier.
effect
I'm
on
making him
people.
work for it. When they did the hybrid for Napa Style, did that not create a precedence of other businesses in town that could go ahead and do it that way, and come to her and say, because of what you did for Napa Style, this is what we want to do, and we want you to okay it?
oh, sure it did. So if somebody else were to come with a very similar model to Napa Style, and in some ways this one is kind of similar, then there is a certain amount of precedent. And as you said before, though, everybody's a little different.
Yeah.
So, I think the more of these you get, the more there is for your planning officer to have something to look at to compare it to. Again, though, you have a floor and you have a ceiling. And here, you're right at the floor. So I don't see that you can go much any lower. But yeah, if somebody had a use that was very, very similar to Napa Style and not as close to Protea, your planning officer might look to the Napa Style standard. Then again, something that looks an awful lot like Protea might ask, well, can we have the Protea standard? And I think there'd be a lot of gravity pulling your planning officer toward that standard. So yes, there is a precedent there.
Okay.
But again, it would only apply in the situation where you're somehow not falling pretty neatly into full service, limited service. You're somewhere in the middle.
Thank you very much.
Councilmember Dornbecker, why don't you start your remarks?
I had already come to the conclusion that even if this did set a precedent, others might come, but if they could not provide additional parking, we could deny them the opportunity to do this. Since you brilliantly, I thought, helped to figure out how they could, and it's something like we did at the Ranch Market. for the bicycle company, because they park tandem on the side of the Ranch Market, so that helped with their parking ability. So I don't think that this is a precedent that is going to damage the town. And I'll tell you the truth, if Stuart Sellers or RH or somebody comes and says, I would like to be able to deliver the food, they can come to the counter and pay for it. We'd like the opportunity to deliver the food to the table for them. They can bus it themselves. They can use the plastics or, biodegradable and hopefully good things to throw away themselves. But I don't think that it's a damage to the town. I think it enhances visitors and locals' experiences. I really enjoy going to Protea, and I would like to be able to sit up, come down, order my lunch, and go up and sit on the roof, and when it's ready, have it delivered to the table, and then I'll clean up the table myself. So anyway, I support this, and I want to see this young business do well in our town. And the one caveat I would like to propose to them is that the only criticism that I have heard is that it's a little more expensive than most people thought, but that's neither here nor there. I just thought I'd tell you. But anyway, I support this change because I think that it will enhance their business and enhance the enjoyment for people who are their customers. And I really do not see it having a harmful impact on our town.
Thank you for your comments. I'm going to swing back over to Councilmember Durham.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Sandra, for your research and pulling in the other information that you did. One of the things that I thought was really interesting in there, too, was discussion about possibly employee parking being more part of that parking lot as well, which I thought was a very valid point, which wasn't brought up, and I think that's a great idea. The hours of use till 9 o'clock I'm fine with. I think the way it's set up already, I think it still works okay. I don't think there's anything wrong with us setting a precedent. That's why we're up here on the council, if that's what we're doing. I think for Protea, for the staff suggestions, I'm all for it. And if it allows other people to come up before us, then that is their right to do. But given your staff support, given the staff report, I fully support it.
So just to be clear, that means the additional 3 parking, 2 on-site, 1 off-site.
With the
There's
employee.
a sign that.
With the sign, yeah.
That's your recommendation, a sign saying public space, or whatever language you're talking about, but to identify you don't have to be a patron to use
Public
that
open
space.
space.
Okay.
Correct.
Are there any other specific elements? Is it just the parking impact and the sign?
That was really it.
That was it.
The parking
And the
and
hours
sign.
of
And the hours,
operation,
which
you had said
the same.
might be reconsidered, but it's not really a request.
Yeah, they're not proposed in the conditions
Right.
before you.
Right.
So I'm fine with the 3 spaces and the 9 p.m. and the sign.
Okay.
Thank you.
And just to back,
I'm fine because.
okay. Councilmember Mueller?
Well, I think I'll be the deciding vote here. I totally agree also with the staff report, and but you guys can,
Feel like state of California in the national election.
there you go. Somebody's got to do it, right? And my reasons, first, I want to make a comment that I support the findings that are made in this resolution. I agree with all of those. I think it's very important that we are talking about 3 cars, 2 that you can find places for on site, and we're only talking about 1 car that is going to be off site. I think that if we can't accommodate 1 car, then I think that we don't really need to be here. We just need to be following the rules and checking them off. So I can easily find that since we're just talking about 1 car, that makes sense to me. Hours of use are fine, especially since we have the 6-month review in place, right, for the business like we do everything else. And that was, so they've only been open like a month, right? So 5 months is just about 6. So I think that takes care of that. If we see any problems then we'll deal with it at the 6-month review, and I'm fine with the sign.
So I want to just be clear, the third parking space requirement would be an in lieu fee, correct? That's
It's considered a rentals fee for off-site parking.
Right, but we're not talking about just 2 spaces, we're talking about 2 spaces and a $1,500 annual fee
Yes.
for that off-site parking.
Yes.
Okay, just so it was clear you were talking about a car off-site.
Right.
Just wanted to make sure that was clear that that was a staff recommendation.
Right.
Yeah. And I believe that's what our applicant said they were begrudgingly willing to accept as a possible solution. Okay, so, Vice
Well,
Mayor?
just to follow up on that, it does say on page 1, the additional parking demand that results from limited table service is accommodated by adding 2 stacked spaces in the existing parking lot for employees and by allowing off-site parking, and there will be an in lieu fee for 1 employee in a designated employee parking zone, and which will be talked about, so you'll be revising the parking management plan to accommodate this.
And that's basically, because there isn't a designated location, the fee would be to cover the cost of either creating a space somewhere else.
We generally work with applicants on a case-by-case basis and find a location where employee parking would be appropriate, given their location and given burdens and impacts in the neighborhood. So
And that's
it
where the
hasn't
fee
been
comes
identified
from.
yet. Yes.
And the administration and oversight of that condition.
But they'll be monitoring that area
Yeah.
for that employee car.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
It would be a designated relocation of a vehicle that would be costing a fee.
What you really need to think about it is they're using the public space for private purpose in order to meet their minimum conditions.
Right.
So, yep.
Good explanation. Vice Mayor?
Since it doesn't really matter.
Let's hear what you have to say anyway.
Actually, I kind of took this a slightly different approach. I think I come to the same conclusion. But what I want to say first of all is that, the initial approval in the Type 41 and our allowance of that through the use permit, it's a little, I won't use underhanded because that's not proper, but the diligence wasn't performed at the outset to determine that you could sell beer and wine because you didn't have the ability to perform for the ABC to receive that permit. That's not the town's responsibility. That was the owners, the business's responsibility in their application to know, doing their diligence, what it was going to require to have a successful business. Because I suspect, and I may be the only person that says this, but I know how beer and wine works, and I know how food businesses work to some extent. It's a real important part of you guys having a successful business, which I support. So I can get behind this because of that. I want you to be supportive. But what I think the council may not have necessarily interpreted, and maybe I read the staff report wrong, was that there was an alternative option of evaluating using, because your petition mentions it, roping off part of the section of the business, which wouldn't necessarily have the same impact on the parking. Now, 1 space I'm not going to quibble over. I do, however, have concern that in the long run we're going to have a race by other applicants to come in and apply a new standard. And it may not be as significant at Napa Style because they've got lots of parking today. But they may not have a lot of parking in the future, as that business, and this council will certainly see, as that business and their parking lot gets developed. So I don't know what will ultimately happen, but I'm supportive of this project as it's presented because I'd hate to be the only one to be the sore thumb here. But I do think that it was a little bit of a short-sightedness by the applicant that might be the issue when you did make that. I don't want to be the person that tells you can't have your business be successful because we all want your business to be successful. We're not sitting up here because we want to fight with you guys having the opportunity to do well in this community because we all benefit. We all thrive from that. I'm okay with the hours, the signs, and other things as they were presented in the staff report. Good luck.
Thank you. And I would share a portion of the Vice Mayor's comment about the responsibility being more on your end than certainly on our end. But I also believe we would have had this conversation 2 months ago instead of today and would probably be reaching the same conclusion that is apparently, if anyone can count to 3, already headed in a certain direction. But I look at it slightly differently with the same evidence. As was mentioned in the public comment, I see it exactly the opposite from the way Carrie put it, which is figure this all out before you let anybody do this. I don't frankly trust the modeling as much as I trust real life and see what happens, because we know what happens in real life out on the street right now. We have tasting rooms that aren't allowed table service that are providing table service delivery on a regular basis. And we have already started to have the dialogue of, what is the ultimate goal for us? We can sometimes get caught up in the ratios and the numbers and the previous limits of parking and other conditions, and forget about what it is we're ultimately trying to achieve, which is appropriate use of property, whether it be business or residential, for the enjoyment of the property owner and the community and the visitors and everything. And so to say, yes, you can open your business, but no, we're not going to give you the conditions where you can be successful, doesn't do any of us any good. I think there has been an evolution of the experience in this town, which does mean, in some cases, instead of doing it at the lowest level of service, that's not the way we behave here in Yountville. We are at the high level of service. We are at the high level of hospitality in all the ways that all the definitions of that term, not just in a business perspective, but in a social and a personal perspective. So I think people would be kind of stunned that they come to Yountville and they come to this really charming small restaurant and they don't have the kind of experience they expect in Yountville, the kind of experience you want to provide, that we want you to provide. I can go to another city and order my food and stand there twiddling my thumbs and keep moving out of the way as people get their food. And I don't find that an enjoyable experience. I think we're up here. I think, as Councilmember Duren pointed out, this is kind of our job, to be evaluating the conditions as they are presented to us, because no two things are exactly the same. And so I can support this with the comments that have been made before. The sign, I think, is helpful. It's something that we haven't done in others shared open space uses. Somehow it works at Bouchon Bakery naturally. It doesn't work in other places like a Gerard or even right next door to you in some cases. That people don't think they can just stop and finish their whatever they didn't get at that business. But that's what we say on paper is supposed to be happening. So I think also the option that was addressed to rope off, I'm surprised that ABC even considers that a legitimate discerning of space. So that's a joke, frankly. You're going to tell me that somebody from Priest Ranch isn't going to step over that rope and go sit down if they can order food from Protea? So, I mean, I guess I'm questioning the ABC's licensing conditions, but I can definitely support this with staff's recommendation. I also, in our further dialogue, want to have a discussion about what it is we think is being triggered here. If we're not talking about additional employees, and I think, yes, if you have additional employees, then you have additional cars, you have additional parking impacts. If just by definition of there's a change, so, oh my gosh, now there's a parking impact, let's figure out if there's a parking impact or not. We have some restaurants that have the 1 to 5 ratio, and they don't satisfy their parking needs because they have 3 times the number of employees as any typical restaurant would have. So we do need to use our discretion and use our experience and use all of what we've learned with other applications and the real practical applications of what's happening out there in the real world. So I think that gets us to
I would like
a motion.
To make a motion. I
resolution number 16-3343, approving a use permit amendment to Protea to allow limited table service at 6488 Washington Street, APN 036-082-027.
Second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing none? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So that was a long way around getting a unanimous approval, but I think it was a very worthwhile conversation. You happen to be a little bit of a test case here, but best of luck to you, and I think there's one less hurdle, and who knows what the next one will be for you, but good luck with that. Yeah.
Mayor, Council, based on the dialogue, I think staff will be working and will be bringing back to you sort of what I'm going to call an AB for a limited service. We'll have a limited service A, which is simply the takeaway pickup counter, and then we'll create a category with a definition that has the limited table service that you just approved, and we'll put the parking standards and definitions, and I think that will give us a better dialogue towards moving towards some stuff.
And please consider in that if we can get away from the term table service.
We'll figure something out. That's why we want delivery. We'll figure out, but I'm just saying the concept.
Because I think that's the kind of nuance we're talking about.
Exactly. What we're really talking about is the ability for the limited service to deliver. So we will use that, product delivery to the customer. So
and to the public comments point, I think that is a conversation that we need to have, and we've already mentioned that we want to have. So I appreciate you putting that on the list.
It'll be done early summer.
Great. Thank you very much. Well, we're already in early summer.
June 21st. I don't subscribe.
June 21st is summer. Sorry, not summer yet.
Wait, I thought it was.
Starts in September, right?
You're saying you can wear white pants now? Is that what
South
you're saying?
America. It's a South American summer he's referring to.
Anyway, let's keep moving on here. Thank you. And thanks to both of you for being here tonight. We have a very exciting next item in our administrative regular items, Veterans Memorial Park Improvements Conceptual Plan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Tonight we have before you our second look at the conceptual park improvement plans for Veterans Memorial Park.
Joe, I'm sorry to interrupt you right out of the gate. Did we get a copy to carry? There is a revised. We have the revised. Okay. All right. Thanks, Joe.
You bet. Where was I? The park was originally part of Veterans Home property prior to the State Route 29 freeway construction in the late 1950s. Following the construction, the state gave Yountville that sliver of land remaining on the east side of State Route 29, deeded for restricted to park use. The town has made significant improvements to the park over the past 5 years, including improvements to the bocce courts, new benches, public restrooms, replacement of asphalt paths with colored paths, and drinking water fountains. The current condition at the north end of the plaza has been slowly deteriorating for a number of years, and in fact, over the last couple of years, it has been on the capital improvement program in fiscal year 14-15. Design and construction were proposed for 2 other parks in town. Council decided and staff decided to do a more comprehensive redesign of the plaza area with paver replacement to better suit the current and future park user needs and potential park programming uses. Mrs. Cagwin from Lori Cagwin Landscape Architecture submitted 4 conceptual designs in November 2015, and staff narrowed it to 2 main project designs. Both designs had similar elements, and these 2 conceptual plans were presented for consideration to the Parks and Rec Advisory Committee, PRAC, on January 21, 2016. PRAC approved the conceptual plan number 2 that is before you this evening. That included a more rounded seat wall surrounding the center plaza. PRAC also had an additional discussion regarding the location of a flagpole, shade for the amphitheater, and use of non-fruiting trees for further design considerations. During this discussion, there was also a member of the Veterans Home who suggested that the flagpole should be moved to a more suitable location. This gentleman also appeared at the town council meeting later in the year, and after further discussion, the council requested the staff do a little bit of research and get some feedback on where the pole should be placed from a source recognized as having the capability and the training to give such advice. On February 2nd, 2016, that's when this plan was brought at the first iteration to the council. On March 3rd, 2016, the staff conducted the first of several conversations with Jack Strigel. He is the senior architect for capital assets and facilities management with the California Department of Veterans Affairs. Myself and Lori Cagwin sat in on the conversation. And during the conversation, several options were discussed with a superior position for the poles as the primary concern and design consideration for the placement. The most suitable location for placing the 2 flagpoles was agreed to be the park entrance on the southwest corner of California Boulevard and Washington Streets. This placement was a superior position in the opinion of Mr. Strigel. There was also a recommendation to include both the state flag and the Missing in Action or MIA flag as well. These flags will be placed on a shorter flagpole but could share the same pole as noted by Mr. Strigel. The plan before you now includes these new flagpole recommendations as recommended. I think it's important to note that earlier today we had another conversation with Mr. Strigel, and he recommended that we swap the 2 flags with the U.S. flag being on the left-hand side of the entrance of the park and the state flag being on the right-hand side as one of his recommendations. The other recommendation that Mr. Strigel made was to remove the star that that is in the earlier council report. He thought that could be construed as something that would be inappropriate for the park in that location.
You're talking about the star, which in the center of the...
That was in the center of the concrete. So if you look at your earlier staff report, that attachment has a star motif in the center. Mr. Strigel recommended removing that.
Relocation or total removal?
Total removal. There were several negative comments made about the potential use for that star, and so rather than try to defend that, we decided to remove the star. On May 19, 2016, the Parks and Rec Advisory Committee was asked to provide feedback and recommendation on the revised conceptual plans. The body voted unanimously in favor of, that was an easy one for me to say, in favor of the revised plan, including the new flagpole locations. They looked at the earlier version. I think it's important to note that what Mr. Strigel did say was, depending on where you were looking at these flags and your position in the park, we could have left it in either way. However, based on his recommendation, that in his opinion, the flagpole should be located in the positions that we're showing you this evening would be the more superior of the 2, and we went with that recommendation. The other comment from the Parks and Rec Advisory Committee on May 19th was their concern about shade in the amphitheater area. It was also a comment they made earlier in the earlier presentation. I think it's important to note that Ms. Cagwin has provided sleeves for umbrellas that will be placed along portions of the amphitheater wall to provide some shade, and there should be at least 1 or 2 trees in the vicinity as well that will also provide shade. The Town Council is asked to review the plans this evening and provide feedback so that we can incorporate and include the requests into the plans. These plans will be brought back to you on the 21st for approval to go out to bid as required by municipal code and state law. So interested tonight to hear what you have to say, your comments, if any, and what we could do to make this a better plan.
Thank you. So
we also have I'm sorry, Mayor. We also have Ms. Cagwin here if you have questions that I'm not capable or not able to answer.
Okay, so to be clear about the revised graphics that you've presented on paper, the Stars and Stripes on the left pole, and you have the POW MIA flag on that same pole. Was that a specific request?
That was at the direction of Mr. Strigel.
And then the state of California goes to the right pole or the one to the west?
Correct, at a lower
level.
That's a shorter pole in terms of height.
And then the stars removed from the center of the activity area. Is there any branch of service, 5 branch of service component recommended anywhere, whether it be a above ground or any other kind of recognition, or?
We're still working on some of the design elements. It was Mr. Straggle's opinion that to get medallions authorized by the Department of Defense is a rather cumbersome and timely task. It's highly regulated, so he recommended that we didn't pursue that design element. However, we have had some discussions about doing some kind of design element in the concrete, similar to what you see at Vandeleur Park, where there's some kind of lettering in the concrete sidewalk that would give some significance towards the military branches without having to use the medallions and then have an approval by the Department of Defense. That's still being worked on.
Okay.
But at this time, we don't have any element that, other than the flags and the MIA flag, that would provide that element that you're asking about.
But no other changes to the graphics beyond those?
No other changes beyond those.
Because the umbrella holes were already proposed originally for additional shade in the amphitheater area. Okay.
Yep.
Any questions from council? Councilmember Dornbecker.
Yes. Joe, I do remember in the original presentation that there was a ceremonial arch at the entryway.
Correct.
And why is that no longer being considered?
The flagpoles took the place of that element. It was just too crowded, in the opinion of our landscape architect, to provide both the flagpoles and that arch. It just was a little too busy in that area, so we eliminated the arch as a necessity for moving the flag to a more superior location.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Councilmember Mueller.
A couple minor questions. Will there be lights on the flagpole, because they'll always the flags will always be up, right? So they have to be lit at night.
To have the American flag displayed in the evening, you do have to have a light that is on the flag. Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
Okay, but
And I'll just clarify, if you've noted, that's the town standard. We've went in and added lighting in all those cases so that we have that situation.
The only alternative to that would be to lower the flag every evening and then put it back up in the morning, and that is just not practical for us. So the lighting is the
like the
preferred
lights and the
option.
flag at the night, so that's good.
It definitely makes it look nice.
And what about, this is very minor too, like a sign that says Veterans Park, is that going to be, I didn't really see that in here, but it's going to be somewhere in there, like it is Yountville Park and all the other
and
parks.
we'll make sure that, what I would say is we'll work, and it needs to be, the official name is Veterans Memorial Park.
Okay,
And we
good.
need to get the naming and everything cohesive. So we'll work on that and make sure that sign may have some additional embellishment to be more reflective of what we're trying to accomplish here.
And then just, overall, I like the design. I think it looks great. I'm glad, I can hardly wait till it's kind of there. I'm actually, I have no comments at all on that. I like the idea. The star did always kind of make me wonder, is that really a good thing to do or not? So I'm very happy that it's kind of gone. So timing, when do we, I know we have to approve this.
Yeah, so we'll come back at the next council meeting for on consent to go out to bid with this project. That will give us about 30 days of bid time. Our Parks and Rec director has events planned, music in the park, so we expect to go to construction late September, early October, after the main events in that park are complete. So sometime before the rain sets in the winter, and while that little nice period of summer and Indian summer are still hopefully ruling the day.
All right, good. So maybe by the first of the year, it should be all done.
I would hope so.
Okay.
I would hope so. Yes.
All right.
Except, did I just hear you say that you're going to tear up and rebuild Yountville Crossroad the same time that you want to tear up and rebuild Veterans Memorial Park, which are two of our three entrances to town? Is that what I just heard?
You did hear that correct, Mr. Mayor. Yeah,
You're going to mention the travel.
the good
trailer,
news is
too?
for Veterans Memorial Park, that's off street. So while it will be a bit of
Off-street, but
I won't mention the ability to use a trailer either.
No.
You're going to have this amazing mural there to mask this whole issue. So,
As a Parks and Rec director,
I have a serious concern about that, regardless of the joking. That is our main entrance to town, California.
well,
I get that it's off
the
street.
alternative is to wait until spring when we actually are going to need to use that park. So timing is based on the park usage and kind of driven by the weather. I mean, we can't really function and expect to construct the park in January, February, and
I understand, but we're also talking about tearing up 2 of our 3 entrances in the middle of harvest, one of the busiest times of the year.
You are correct, Mr. Mayor, but we will not be tearing up the street. We will be tearing up the park, so it's much different.
With construction, fencing, and vehicles and all the visual disruption that comes with that, right by our entrance into town.
That's correct.
Okay, I'm not okay with that, actually. But other questions or comments, Vice Mayor?
I have one comment.
Yeah.
So I'm, the star, because I presented this to my family at home, and so they're just like, oh, well, that's beautiful, and it's going to be a nice addition, and all that good stuff. And so the decision is sort of final that there will be no stars on ours.
It was heavily recommended that we remove the star by the Department of Veterans Affairs senior architect.
Okay. Because of the approval process?
Because of
Looked
the
like a pentagram.
negative connotation.
Satan.
Okay. Well, it's an interesting feature. I mean, I'm not going to lose any sleep over it. I just was curious what the ultimate, it could have been concentric circles or something, I guess. So there's going to be no design element in the middle.
There's going to be the banding that we originally proposed, which is stone banding around that circle, but nothing to signify.
Because it is elevated, correct?
It's not going to be elevated. No, it's going to be at grade because that works better for the programming for the Parks and Rec Department. So we're going to use some stone banding around that circle to kind of give it a little bit of a design a breakup from the rest of that concrete and kind of set it off a little bit as the center of the park. But no specific design element in that circle. That's correct, Vice Mayor.
Okay. Thank you.
So I've already expressed my displeasure about the scheduling. I also am really disappointed to see the loss of the representation of the branches of service. I'd like to see that return in some capacity. The reason I brought up the idea of going to an expert for his or her opinion was I wasn't totally comfortable having it on the ground where there might be music and dancing. That didn't make any sense to me, but I would really like to see the representation return in some way. When it was originally brought to us, we saw a picture of a granite slab that represented the military branches. I'd like to see our version of that somewhere, because this is Veterans Memorial Park. This is not just the park at the south end of town.
We will look at 2 options. I think one would be kind of the vertical display, or if we're putting just like Joe mentioned, in Vandeleur Park, we have some passages that are written into it, and we may be able to incorporate, some language to reflect what you're talking about.
And I think I like that creativity of presentation. I want to see that happen. Whether it's like in Vandeleur and it's stamped into the concrete, I'm not 100% comfortable with that, walking over the memorial message.
That wasn't the suggestion from the senior architect wasn't that the walking over it, although he did have a little bit of pause for concern on that. It was mainly the bureaucracy to get the Department of Defense to improve a medallion use for anybody besides the Department of Defense.
And so I get that. And so if we aren't going to go with the formal medallion representation, then we can get creative. And,
I also wanted to just point out there still remains 2 art pads and possibly a third in the design. And so anytime we have our call for artists, our intent is to fill that space with either art by a veteran or some sort of military representation. So potentially that's something we can work on with the Arts Commission to expand on further to make that
because we haven't
statement.
done that yet once.
We have not received any applicants, but potentially if we
Two
were to
horses and an arch don't.
No. If we were able to commission a piece, I think we may see a different response when you're asking for it on loan. We haven't been as successful.
We have not.
So
We've targeted. The Arts Commission has not received a art solicitation by an artist, but
I think we need to be more proactive for this. We're trying to make this Veterans Memorial Park. This is not just another new part of the Art Walk. So let's treat it differently.
Well, and what I was getting to, as part of the project, we can actually look at setting aside or suggesting funds that would go towards actually commissioning a piece that would represent the military, and it would be owned by the town on permanent display to get to where you want to be. But our success is,
we'll add that to your budget.
And our success has just been not finding a piece to be on loan. If the town actually commissioned a design and went through that process with an artist, I think we would find success to meet your goal.
And I know that if we're talking about a bronze statue, we've now just added $80,000 to the budget.
Not
but
necessarily.
But what I'd like to hear from the two of you is being creative. The Roots of Peace Memorial Grove up at the Veterans Home, they planted trees and put modest plaques, and that works. I think there are pillars that represent things. I mean, we can, I know Lori can be creative about this, and you guys can be creative, and our expert can be creative. I would really like to see, and this is just my opinion about if we're going to significant effort and expense to really represent.
We hear you, and we'll give you. We've got some ideas, so we'll go put some ideas to put it in and finish that off with that.
And I'd like to add to that. I agree with some of the creative things that the mayor was mentioning, because I don't want to recreate the brouhaha they had down in the city of Napa.
Right.
So let's be very cognizant of errors that were made there. And it's not, when you work with the art committee, it's not about necessarily a statue. It is about something that represents and honors the veterans.
And that's just an idea. And I think that when I hear you speak, this is very much more about getting input from other people. It's not a decision I see staff making. I think that there needs to be some sort of group that discusses this project, this piece of the project. It's too important for us to, because we are fairly creative, but we're not artists, right? So I think that maybe we need to brainstorm on how to better approach that particular piece of the project.
And just from our recent learning from Yountville Community Park, we didn't get community participation, I'll say, until the very last moment. So we need to be aware that we may get interested parties at the very last moment on June 21st, as they see this as a almost final design. And so we need to be prepared to explain what we are doing and what we're not doing.
I would say this is very close to the final design. But
Yeah.
June 21st doesn't give us a lot of time to do a whole bunch of work. I will say that Parks and Rec Director Holland was probably more spot on when she said, we have 3 additional spots for art, 2 at least, and possibly 3 that would probably be a good starting spot for possible locations to help do what you guys are asking us to do, which is make it truly a Veterans Memorial Park. So I think that's probably the better venue for us to go down to try to figure out how to do that, and then incorporate some of those other design elements that we've been talking about this evening that can be kind of incorporated in a rather simple fashion.
Even if it needs to be added eventually because of budget or because of fabrication or whatever, knowing, you have some designated areas that could be used if it's not something you can incorporate into the base design.
We will work on a couple of the ribbon ideas on the entryway, something that says as you come in, stamped into the walkway in honor of America's veterans, and we'll figure out some wording. We'll talk with Jack and get those worked in, and then we may be able to get the 5, as you walk in. I think the idea of having a pad and a commission and then letting a special body evaluate that, we can do that. So we'll add that to the budget and incorporate that in. I think that that will be an added feature that comes in, but it gives us a great way to not only work with the Arts Commission, but also involve some of the Veterans Home in the screening and selecting of the solicitations that might come forward. I think that could be a really unique way to make that home, resonate from the veterans in that involvement. So that's
And to your point, Margie, I don't envision it. I think the Arts Commission would just lend their support and their structure, but it really would be more of a community project where, especially obviously focusing on the veterans, work together on that particular piece of art is very important.
And I think what we do here is we put a number that we're willing to commission and then have people make a solicitation, and I bet you we would see a different outcome.
Yeah, I don't know if there's a solution to the scheduling of this. I'm really concerned about the scheduling. I understand that we're weather dependent.
Well, we're the staff, to your point, Mayor, the staff is in discussion after the discussion, the last council meeting with Vice Mayor and the rest of the council members chiming in about their concern on Yountville Crossroad. We're trying to move that later into the season. The problem is that we start getting into weather, and that's a really tough time to build a road. So the alternative is to let that road fall apart, which we just can't do. This one is kind of in the same boat. We can push it a little bit, but we don't have a lot of room to push this into the winter, because constructing a park in the winter is a losing proposition.
And I know it's no solace to you, but in this particular case, the nature of the Yountville Crossroad reconstruction will not have the same duration and the ongoing nature that Fennell Road did. But I'm just saying, we're looking at something that's a 2-week duration.
It's probably going to be 2 weeks of some kind of traffic control, and it's probably going to be a week and a half of limited traffic access at the most. I mean, that's how it's going to go. It's going to go pretty fast.
Not to distract too much from what we're talking about tonight, but the request I had made was that we thoroughly review with county and others about truck diversion.
We are working on that as we speak.
So before we finalize timing on those two projects, let's see if we have how much wiggle room we have for both of them, please.
We will. We're trying to separate them as much as we can and push, in particular, Yountville Crossroad as deep into the season as we can before the weather starts getting to be a real concern.
But what I would say, I'm very happy with the progress that's been made, and Lori, the adjustments you've made over the discussions and just the general concept as a whole. We forget a lot of what's already been done, and we're starting to focus on some of the kind of priority elements. But overall, I think people are going to be really thrilled with what we're doing. We've seen that even with a little hesitation from some residents on some of our other park renovations. They're all absolutely gorgeous, more functional, something to be even prouder of. So this will become one of our crown jewels, I'm sure of it.
And can I make one?
Yes.
One last comment. The furniture that you're going to put in here, I think that I've seen some in town, maybe, at one of the parks. It looks a little new and modern. I think something that really kind of still captures our historic, really what we see mostly around Yountville. I'd like to kind of continue with that style.
Have had that discussion, and we completely agree. I would say that the furniture that we're looking at for the park is beefier. It's more park-like, but still something that we can maintain. So it's a much larger kind of look, a much heavier feel, but represents kind of a traditional park
Less
look.
modern, more
Yes,
rustic.
Thank you.
Yes.
Less modern, thank
what
you.
we've kind of settled on. So
Yes.
we've had the full range of discussion on that, and we also want to see something that's more
Something that
rustic.
kind of ties things together instead of
Absolutely.
like, oh, look, each park is different.
I think that design element was okay for that park, but we want something different for our other parks, that more rustic look.
Okay.
So I want to invite Lori or Carrie, if you'd like to comment further. You don't have to, certainly. If you are, you've got to come up and lower the microphone, please.
Yeah, that's going to be a little high.
Good evening, I'm Lori Kagwin. I agree with the military element. It was news to me about the star and the connotations that the a professional recommended we remove it because of things I wasn't aware of. It have nothing to do with the military, but some symbolism that could be misconstrued and in conflict with the military. So
we don't want to do that.
No. So this element of the part of the star, I think, is a nice element, but developing it where it maybe is smaller and there's a repeated pattern in the center portion of the plaza would provide interest, and it would reduce the size of that open space. So I think we're still in transition as to how we will make this a richer, more appropriate center stage. And I think the Arts Commission could be involved with that. It's something we'll be doing next week, probably have another meeting and maybe have some options for that center area, what would be more appealing to the whole.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? Did we give you enough direction?
Yep.
We've
Thank
already,
you very much.
We're doing some pencil sketches already over here on the side. So.
Okay.
I think we're in good stead. Thank you very much for your feedback, and we will bring something back that I think you'll be very happy with, and ultimately, so will the veterans and the rest of the residents of the town and the visitors.
So we're going to put that drawing up there soon? I mean, even though it's going to be a little different.
We will once we get a
Talked
more
about last
finalized design. That's been what we've been doing, certainly well before the council meeting, that this project will be coming forward for approval. This is what we've been doing in the past.
And we put a laminated version of everything we've done before every meeting.
The
so that
staff
people
report
that are
and
wandering through are
the
aware.
map.
Oh, it's already up there, okay. So it's already on site, okay.
Yountville Community
good,
Park. We
okay.
do it at several parks so that people at the north end of town and the south end of town are both aware of what's going on, and we're trying to be very proactive in noticing everyone who could have any comment to.
Thank you for that.
Including those
You
that
bet.
said they were quite aware and want to be involved in all of our parks.
Right. Okay, so we've covered that one. We have a couple brief staff informational reports.
Very brief.
Sorry.
Tonight. No PowerPoint. Maybe one PowerPoint.
You
Two
knew
slides.
it. You knew it
So
was coming.
tonight's water conservation discussion, we are at 33% for this month, for the month of May, and for the year to date, 32.82% in savings. So still significant, well above the 25% that we targeted for conservation. And as you know, at the end of October, we will let this conservation measure sunset and see what the governor and his staff come up with in terms of water conservation requirements going forward. Next.
Those were two slides, but we'll forgive you.
Yeah.
I think one was a
He needs
cover
an
slide.
introduction.
I don't have a slide.
Yeah.
Well, I don't have a slide for the next one, so kind of.
Good
But leave
average.
that one up with his name on it. Oh, okay. All right, go ahead.
Parks update, or the Public Works projects update. I will say that the Fennell project, the paving is complete. They are doing some planting of the both sides of the street. Striping has been laid out, so for those of you who want to have a look at what the striping is going to look like, it's there right now. They call that cat tracking, so it's been cat tracked so that we can review it. We are happy with the layout, and once we were hoping they would get to it this week. It looks like they won't get to it till next Tuesday. Vine Trail will also be the striping will also be complete on the Vine Trail at the same time, because apparently it's the same company. So that may be why they're delaying it until next Tuesday. So the good news is that both the Vine Trail and the work on Fennell will be complete by the end of next week. The pedestrian bridges that we've been talking about for the past couple of weeks are going to start this week, probably tomorrow. We're in conversations with the Hotel Yountville to make sure that their guests are disrupted as least as possible, and we hope that that project is complete in about 4 or 5 days. So looks like we're ending the fiscal year pretty strong, and we're looking forward to getting started for the next fiscal year.
So regarding the striping on Fennell, you're confident that there's enough space on the north side for all different types of vehicles to park there?
We saw, I should have taken a picture of it, but I saw a Hummer parked in that space this week, and it was perfect. It provided enough space for the Hummer to park well within the parking area, and had the Class 2 bike lane completely free of any vehicle at all. So
I think that Hummer was also parked on the other side of the street.
No, it was parked on the north side. It was parked on both sides.
There was a truck there today.
Yeah,
in the bike lane. In the
once-
cat track bike lane,
once-
which is illegal.
Once it is illegal. Once that gets completed, it will not be parking there, and if they are parked there, they will be cited by the sheriff. That will be an illegal park.
And are we doing a stamped crosswalk?
We are not doing a stamped crosswalk. We are doing a zebra ladder high-vis crosswalk in that area. Stamped
A zebra
crosswalks
ladder.
are reserved for...
yes.
The stamped crosswalks are reserved for the commercial area on Washington and part of Yount Street.
No idea what that is.
We do the zebra style for high visibility crosswalks, the ladder style.
It's like on Mulberry.
Like on Mulberry.
Oh.
That zebra ladder.
That's
Zebra ladder.
Yep.
Zebra ladder.
Any other questions about any of the projects?
You've got lots of technical terms, cat tracking and zebra park.
I noticed that they are the center line is shifting slightly to the south of where they had the reflectors.
You're correct, Mayor. That is the location
term.
for the double yellow stripe. Those stick and stomps that they place are temporary at best and placed by people who do their best to place them kind of in the center of the street, but by no means are they accurate. So what you see in paint on the ground right now are going to be the location of the permanent markings.
And what are we doing at the end of the sidewalk that stops at the Bartisono Maxine's Vineyard?
Just falls off.
Just goes
the
into
street.
dirt? We have to put an end fence like we did?
We will
at
put an end
Crossroad?
barrier. We're going to put some kind of an end barrier.
And then it's just landscaping from there?
Yeah, well, we're actually in discussions with the Bartisonos because they do use that little area to access the vineyard,
Right.
especially with their gondolas. So we don't want to put something in the way that will cause them to have trouble with harvest. So we're definitely in conversations with them about the landscaping that's going in there and any end barrier if we do put an end barrier in there. Most likely, we're going to put an end barrier at the end of the driveway at 1905, so the property next door to the Bartisono property, and that will stop people from walking down through the dirt and into their property.
Okay. Meeting reports. I will be very brief on the flood control. We held the first of two public hearings for the 2016-17 budget with final adoption agendized for June 21st. Napa Valley Transportation Authority, their budget is on the agenda for next week. Vice Mayor Hall and Councilmember Moeller will be representing. I will be out of town. Also, there is a ribbon cutting planned tentatively for July for the official opening of the Vine Trail from North Napa up here to Yountville. So we'll see how that timing works. Do we have Upper Valley Waste Management?
Nope.
Okay.
Brief.
Another meeting? Yes, Councilmember Dornbecker.
I have League of California Cities Community Services Policy Committee report. We, as a committee, voted to support AB 2444, E. Garcia, which is more money for California parks, water, climate, and coastal protection, and outlaw access for all after 2016. And it will be, the money will be delivered, in a ratio of residents, so population. So, but there should be some money coming our way from that, so we supported that.
Thank you.
I have one of those too.
Okay. Councilmember Mueller?
I also attended the California League Environmental Quality Committee last Thursday. We talked extensively about the ballot measure for adult use of medical marijuana. And the only thing I wanted to bring up is that for medical marijuana as well as adult use, which is recreational, when we finally do whatever we're going to do on what we're going to allow or ban, we have the ability to ban delivery, outdoor, and indoor growing for everything except medical marijuana. Recreational marijuana, you must allow indoor growing, but the town can regulate it. So that's the only exception between those two. So we can, when we come back to that, I thought that was important. Another important, something else that we talked about quite a bit was the referendum for the plastic bags. That will be on the ballot as well. And when that wording comes out, I know it's a little early, it's not November yet, but it is a referendum that is going to, it's a referendum to potentially overturn the plastic bag ban, because that's what the referendum is. But the wording is going to be such that you need to vote yes on the referendum. So read it carefully, because that is saying that the actual wording is like, are you willing to allow that the state law should be retained as part of the referendum? So it's one of those, vote yes if you mean no against the. So pay attention to that.
That is a good segue to my Association of Bay Area Governments General Assembly and Executive Board meeting, because it was 11 quality hours down in Oakland. The outcome, in short, is that the Metropolitan Transportation Commission is most likely, or may have already done so in their board meeting, agreed to basically take over the staff of ABAG and have the executive director of MTC have a dotted line reporting to the ABAG executive board until the current executive director leaves MTC, and then the two boards will work together to hire the new executive director of MTC. Because the problem is MTC has all the money and ABAG has all the projects, and ABAG does land use work and MTC does transportation projects, and they don't like each other. And so it was kind of an effort in futility, but that's what happened. Today, I was elected chair of the City Selection Committee with Mayor Tekel from Napa, the vice chair. Also, we agreed, as we discussed a little bit earlier about Marin Clean Energy, the City Selection Committee agreed to appoint Supervisor Brad Wagenknecht as our representative for all of our jurisdictions within Napa County on the MCE board. That will be reviewed again in January when we meet again. Also, I just wanted to recognize the Napa Valley Vintners, all the volunteers, all the vintners, the restaurants and chefs, everyone that made Auction Napa Valley Weekend, again, a huge success, raising more than $14 million for literally hundreds of local nonprofits here in the Valley. So kudos to everyone that made that so successful. And to all those that were up for election today, thank you for your service or your intended service. Now we can leave this meeting and find out what the results are. But hopefully everyone participated and voted. So any other reports or announcements? Seeing no others, let's see. We have some closed session items here.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor, there's one thing I would like to bring up.
Okay.
And that is that also I received an alert from the League of California Cities today about the governor's proposal for by right approval for affordable housing. And the League opposes it, and it really is, it preempts local discretionary land use approvals of specified housing developments. And it, is something that takes the local government's control away. So I reached out to Steve to say, can we write, can we contact our legislators and say we do not want this to be approved? We all, and I don't have the power to do that. So at some point, I would just like to bring up to the five of us that I think it would be a good idea to revisit the idea that as a council, we could take positions on some of these issues and how we could work that out, because I feel that we've had a very hands-off kind of attitude with League of California Cities. But I think that since we are active in it and we are interested in the issues, that we as a council could change our minds and figure out a way in which we could have a designated person who would be the advocate, who would then respond in the name of town or whatever. So it's just something for us to think about in the future. I'd like us to think about.
We can certainly review the council protocol
And that's exactly the right place, Mayor, as it is, many communities do have a process or a council ad hoc committee that reviews and does some things, so it's certainly something. And we do, I would say the council has, this council has a higher level of participation and involvement in things than some prior councils, so that protocol is appropriate.
I think
to
the
review.
process is going to be important, though, that there not be an expectation that any one of us
Exactly.
can,
We understand.
dictates that message be told, that there is a process for voting, and as long as we all agree that that's the message we want to send, then
With
we
the
do that.
council's concurrence, if that's something you like, I'll do a little searching as to what some mechanisms a few other communities do, and we'll put a little staff report together for some discussion on the protocol update.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. So we do have two closed session items for the reasons stated. Town Attorney, do we anticipate any reportable action?
I don't.
Okay. With that,